Well, here we go.
Okay.
Dad, thanks for coming over. For people watching, the quick explanation of why we're even doing this is fairly simple. Dad found this awesome video that he put together for Grandpa and Grandma, being Howard and Jane Uible. And the occasion was Howard's upcoming 90th birthday and then the two of their upcoming 63rd anniversary. And you obviously conducted all the local interviews yourself because we hear your voice. And then you even got all these people from far away to, I guess, do their own recordings and mail them to you or something.
We got a few of them, and I can't remember how we made the logistics work, but somehow it worked. But
somehow they found a camera and and did it. And so
the idea was to give Mom and Dad a present.
Yeah.
On behalf of those two occasions.
Yeah.
Of things that they normally wouldn't have thought about it in those terms.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the idea. It's super cool. And of course now it's arguably even more important that we have it at this point. Now that so many of these people have passed, it's so cool having video footage of everybody. And you and I have speculated a couple of times now that this might be the only existing video footage of at least a few of these people. So I think that alone made it seemed important that we should not just share the original video with people, but I tried to clean up the audio and video as much as I could in editing to get it sounding and looking a little nicer. And then it just seemed obvious that, man, I don't know as much as I wish I did about these people. So hence, here we are.
Well, the hardware, too, was a real challenge because back then you didn't have the cell phones and video cameras and
exactly
and the cassettes that we used in here. I don't even remember what they were called.
Yeah.
But they were and the audio. There were no microphones. The only microphone was on the camera. So
exactly.
It was pretty crude and
We're talking still at a point in time where probably less than 50% of families even owned a video camera at that point.
I would say
and even then, it was going to be a fairly low quality home gamer. A high quality video camera was awfully darn expensive.
Well, I remember at the time that we converted these little cassettes of whatever they were called. I had somebody convert them over to a VHS tape.
Yeah.
Because everybody had a VHS player.
Exactly. Nobody had those little oddball standards.
No. And so by making a VHS, Mom and Dad could watch it anytime they wanted to. And I think we gave out copies of some of them to some of the people, if I remember right.
Yeah. So let's get into our first one here. We got Lou and Jack Sainer. There are a few people here I don't even recognize, but I obviously recognize them. I spent many summers. We made trips out to the orchard, so like they were very familiar to me.
Well, just a little bit of background. Mom and Dad grew up in College Hill in Cincinnati, and born and raised there, went to school, went to college there, and then later on decided that they wanted to move out in the country. And they had an opportunity from my grandpa, Pappy, which is my mom's dad, who had a farm out in Bethel. And in 1947, and I was 2 years old. And they moved out to Bethel. And so their friendship, their circles, became kind of two separate circles with a common ground in the middle. And so some of these people that we interviewed are more on the Bethel side, and some are more on the Cincinnati side. And so Jack and Lou Sainer had a farm about a mile from our farm, right on 133. And their farm was a little bit bigger than ours. And they became good friends, and it's probably because of Bob and me. Bob was 1 year older than me. Tom was 2 or 3 years older than Bob. And then Nancy and Kay came later. And so Bob and I were almost the same age, and we were in 4-H together. And then then Mom and Lou took on the Cub Scout group for a long time.
Which they mentioned in here.
And so we became very good friends.
Yeah.
And did a lot of things together. Jack had a wonderful farm there.
Yeah.
He turned the regular farm into an apple orchard later on.
Yeah.
And made his own cider and made a full-time operation from selling apples on the roadside.
Yeah.
And he also is the only person I knew in Claremont County who had his own airplane, his little two-seater Cessna, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And he had a hangar out there, and he had his own runway in the back of the farm. So Jack and Lou were an important part of our upbringing. And of course, Bob and I were at the county fair every year. And so that's a little bit of background of who they are. They were a very close part of our family.
Yeah. I have memories of not obviously spend that much time with them. But because Grandpa and Grandma took us out there every summer to get some cider and buy some apples and just sit and talk with them for a while, I had very clear memories of walking around the orchard with Jack and just him telling us stories and teaching us things. And I to this day, I feel like I can smell that orchard. if I'm just walking through it, it brings back memories. I hadn't thought about that whole place in a while.
Well, Jack was he made his own cider.
Yeah.
And he's the only person that I knew who had an apple orchard that he would not use any dropped apples.
I remember that
cider.
That you and Grandpa too probably explained to me as a kid that's a big deal. That most places use the crap that fell on the ground and has got some soft spots already, and that's what they use for.
And he had his
cider.
own recipe. He had 20 bushels of wine sap and 18 bushels of Granny Smith and 10 bushels of this. That was his recipe. And take it. And so that's...
I love it.
It was an important part of growing up with the Sainers.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, let's get into this one.
Okay. To Jane and Hal, I want to congratulate you both on this very special occasion. I was asked to... tell a few of my fond memories of the two of you, and I have so many it was difficult to pick one. But I do remember one very funny and humorous incident back in the 60s. Jane, you and I decided to take a refresher course in typing at the local high school. So we enrolled, and needless to say, we were the two oldsters in the class. Our classmates were high schoolers and college kids, but we hung in there. When they put us down at our desks, we had brand new electric typewriters. I had never seen or used an electric typewriter, and I don't believe you had either. But we stayed for quite a few weeks. But then the big night came. Our instructor said, "Now tonight we're going to type to music." And he proceeded to play a recording of the Stars and Stripes forever. Well, I know we could do many things, but to type to music, no way. So I think that was my last night in the typing class, and I believe it was yours too, Jane. But it was fun, and we did so many things together that were really fun. But I want to say thanks for all the memories. And thank you for being such wonderful neighbors and friends to us. And again, congratulations on this very auspicious occasion.
Nate. Jack, you got some memories of...
Well, I have many fine memories of the picnics and the evenings that we had with Howard and Jane. As well as our trip on the Delta Queen. And I do have some trivia. But, and it has a point to it if I, as long as I don't have a brain block. But, way back when, many years ago, while visiting with Howard, I made mention that I was wanting to retire my old Kodak Pony camera and had and hoping to get a new camera. And so Howard then went to his desk and brought out the consumer's research and turned to the page where it had the best for the least was the Konica Auto Reflex camera. So I've had many years with that old camera, having taken so many good pictures, and certainly want to thank Howard for showing me that camera.
Steering you on the right
Yeah.
way.
And the point I want to make is in conversation with Howard, he's always interested in what the other person has to say. And I just want to wish him a happy birthday and hoping he and Jane have a very happy anniversary.
Jack, didn't you take Howard up one time and into the plane and take pictures of the farms?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Or take some of the kids up, I think, too, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Uible kids?
I don't know about the Uible kids, but I know we took Jane and Hal for a nice ride once.
Yeah, I'm sure they enjoyed that.
Lou, do you remember the Boy Scout or the Cub Scout group down at Point Pleasant when Kay
Oh.
fell out of the stroller?
Oh, yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
That was really an experience. Jane and I took 9 Cub Scouts in what was that little Ford car? We had 9 kids, and Kay was a 9-month-old baby. And there we are, all spread out to have our picnic with the Cub Scouts. And Kay tipped over her walker and struck her head and knocked her unconscious. Well, I panicked because I had never seen anyone unconscious. What could we do? Jane said, well, take her to a doctor. So I had never driven that car. Bob held the baby, and I drove into New Richmond. We found a doctor, and he said she had just struck a nerve, and it was like a knockout punch. She was unconscious, but she came to. And then we came back to Bethel, and I took her to our regular doctor, and he said, well, she's fine, but Lou, you go home and take 2 aspirin. So, but Kay would knock, every time she bumped her head, she would knock herself out. And it happened quite a few times. She had no hair and very thin skin, but that was quite an incident for all the Cub Scouts. Another time I had all the Cub Scouts here, and Dickie Winder came up and jumped on our horse, and he came up to the fence, and the horse stopped, but Dick didn't. He went over the top and broke his arm. So there I had another incident with the kids. But Cub Scouts was a big thing. I think we did that for 6 years. I know I did. I had Tom 3 years and Bob either 2 or 3 years. We learned to use tuna fish cans, and we made sleighs for Christmas. Jane was very creative. She always had good ideas for the activities for the Scouts. It was a lot of fun. Okay, I remember, I'm sure Jane and I met through the PTA. She became the president, and I was her secretary. So we really ran the PTA. We knew how to do things. The other thing that Jane and I did that was so interesting, we enrolled in a camera class from the famous O. Sharp, the local cameraman. We went one time, and that was enough of that. We didn't learn too much, so we had to learn camera all on our own without the help of Oscar Sharp. So.
Well, Steve, you were active in 4-H too, weren't you? Okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I can remember taking you and the boys with your animals to the fairs. I remember the boys had the old bull that we loaded, and I can't remember what we picked up at your place, but
There was pigs one year, and then I had a couple of calves.
it must have been a calf that we were able to haul along with the bull.
Yeah, you're probably right, because we wouldn't have had anybody. We never had a trailer or anything.
You know, we have snapshots of him loading animals, but we had forgotten what you had. I said sheep.
Yeah, well, I had sheep one year.
Oh, did you?
Uh-huh.
Well, there you
But
go.
we were in the same 4-H club, and then I think we were in the electric club together, too. Bob
Oh,
and I were.
really? Oh, well, there was always something going on.
4-H.
Do you remember in the Cub Scouts, the kite contest?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that was a sad affair, wasn't it? Your dad brought the book home from the library, How to Make a Box Kite. And we made a great big box kite with the boys so they could fly it. And do you remember the Cub Scout master? Gary Hayes' dad, Ed Hayes.
That's right. Uh-huh.
Well, we got up to the park, and the kids were all supposed to fly their own kites, and the one that flew the farthest won the prize. Well, Ed was the scoutmaster, and he took over his son's kite and flew it the farthest because our kid's kite string broke and got away. I don't know about yours. What happened to yours? Oh, we did a lot of things. We were very active. Jane and I did a lot of biking together. And one day we got lost, and we were only about a mile from the Uible house, but we couldn't find a way to get back to the Uible house. We watched the power lines, and she said, Lou, I know we're on the power lines, just follow them. Well, the road didn't go that way, and it was a hot day, a very hot day. She said, oh, I wish I had a beer. We didn't normally go out and drink beer, but when we got back that day after that long, hot bike ride, we sat on the back porch and we had a nice cold beer. Nothing ever tasted better. So, those are our happy memories. Lots of them. Kay and Nance spent a lot of time with the Uibles. Jane was the only babysitter I ever had, except for my family. If we had to go someplace, the kids went up there. So when they found out that your parents were going to move, well, they were actually kind of mad. They thought it was nasty that the Uibles should move away. They were very fond of both of them. But the only thing Kay ever said, Jane was such a good cook that she would slice olives in her jello salad. And Kay didn't care for that. You know, little kids are not crazy about olives, but Jane put olives in her jello salad.
That was not a highlight of it.
I guess you remember when Kay stayed up at your house, don't you? You had to take her to school. 1960. I was in the hospital.
With Nancy.
No, I think I had some surgery. And Kay was, I don't know what grade she would have been in, but she stayed at your house and you had to take her on the school bus. She couldn't stay here with the boys because they had barn work to do and they wouldn't be able to get her on the bus.
Okay.
And she stayed at your house.
Huh.
You were responsible to get her. She remembers it.
Must not have been any disasters then.
No. And Mr. Bryant, I believe, was the school bus driver, and he remembered you taking her on the bus.
Huh.
So,
I had one experience.
yeah. Okay, you want to start?
Okay.
We took the Delta Queen, it was two families of the Berlews and the Uibles and Jack and I. And we flew to Memphis, and toured Memphis, and I remember going to Mound Island, and Jane and Hal were familiar with it. They'd been there before, and they showed us around. Then we boarded the Delta Queen, and it was the day they had the race between the Belle of Louisville and the Delta Queen.
Wow.
And we had such a wonderful trip on the river. We played cards, ate popcorn, and did everything that could be done, but it was a beautiful trip for all of us.
Well, I liked it best because this was a bargain trip. Some English people had canceled their reservations because they thought they would have gambling on the boat. That's something the boats don't have, gambling.
Not the American Queen, Delta Queen, or Mississippi.
Well, no, not the Delta Queen lines.
Mm-hmm.
But we done got the very exclusive rooms at a bargain price, so it was very enjoyable vacation.
Yes.
Neat.
Okay, Hal, have a very happy birthday. Don't overdo it. Just enjoy it. And I know your anniversary will be a wonderful occasion. And I'm so happy to have been part of your last years around Bethel. And we hope to see you in the very near future.
Best wishes, Howard and Jane. Have an enjoyable anniversary. And we certainly enjoy being with you at any time of the year.
All right, Dad. Who's next?
Okay, in this next section we have Jane and Charlie Gruber.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned before that Mom and Dad had two circles. And the first one, the Zayners, were from the Bethel Circle, and Jane and Charlie were from the Cincinnati Circle.
Yeah.
And if I think back of Mom and Dad and the life that they lived, the social part of their life was incredible. Mm-hmm. They had more friends, and when I say friends, I mean close friends.
Yeah, yeah.
Very close friends, over long periods. Mm-hmm. And the Cincinnati group, I think in general, they were all within 2, 3, 4 years of each other. Mm-hmm. And I think most of them went to Hughes High School together, so they knew each other in high school. Mm-hmm. And then they all went to college, almost all of them, and they went to University of Cincinnati in college. Mm-hmm. So they became friends, not only from high school, but it carried over into, and they were all local. They were all Cincinnati people. And at that point, they started marrying each other. Mm-hmm. And Mom and Dad got married at that point. Mm-hmm. And then that was during the Depression, so times were tough. Yeah. So jobs were difficult to get. Mm-hmm. And then they started having children, and they were all doing this about within 4, 5, 6 years of each other. So they're all going through these different stages. And those friendships, as you can tell from what Jane and Charlie are going to talk about here, were tight, and until they died. It was that close, and you don't see many people in today's world have those long relationships that are that close, because and kids were always involved. In the parties. Coming out to the farm was a huge thing that everybody looked forward to. Mm-hmm. Charlie, if I remember right, worked for the EPA, and that was the very beginning of climate environmental. The EPA, the Environmental Protective Agency, had a big building down on William Howard Taft, if I remember right. And he worked there, and he was the only person who I ever knew was into that field that early on. Way before anybody was talking about saving the environment. And he did that for many years. And if I remember right, after he retired, he became a professor at UC.
Okay.
Teaching climate change.
Gotcha.
And this is back in the 50s, 60s, 70s or so. Mm-hmm. And one funny thought that I have of Charlie was that he was the only person I knew who owned a Crosley car.
Okay.
And a Crosley car was made in Cincinnati by Powell Crosley. Mm-hmm. It was a super mini car. Very high gas mileage, way ahead of its time. Mm-hmm. About the size of a Mini Cooper today. And Charlie was a big man. He was tall, 6'2", 6'3".
Yeah, exactly.
And I remember him driving that Crosley out to the farm and getting out of it. And whenever I see the Crosley name on a car, I think of Charlie. But But they were good friends, and they were out at the farm all the time, and these burgoo parties that they talked about. They were tight, and they refer in the video here a lot about the Glums. Well, there was actually about 7 or 8 couples who were in that group. But about as they got older, there was 4 or 5 of them that did all the traveling together, and that was the Glum, the Grubers, Leevers, Uibles, and Morrisons. But there were the Whitings and the Jones and some other people along there. But they were good people, and I think, didn't they come over to visit Mom and Dad at the Seasons in the nursing home at one point?
I think they did. Continue to visit even then. I may not have been there for that, or I don't have memories of that, but I've told you it's just sitting here. I do remember the Grubers coming to visit when Cy and I would just happen to be at Grandpa and Grandma's for the weekend, and they would pop in and just sit around for a little bit, and I had totally forgotten until you mentioned what a big and strong guy he was. That me as that little kid, any grown man shakes your hand, it hurts, but. Mr. Gruber especially, man, that guy had a bone-crushing handshake, and that I'll never forget.
But all these people had just a wonderful sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
There was never any negativism. It was
You never heard stories about drama in their whole group of friends.
Never. And they got together. It was just laughter and games and it was. It's a family that I never saw could generate those kinds of friendship and happiness over that long of a period.
Yeah.
And Grubers were a big part of that.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about the Derby parties in a while, and I've totally forgotten what a big deal they were to Grandpa and Grandma. And actually, just listening to Charlie talk about it reminded me that I remember the year that Grandpa had an idea where he wanted the tickets. We were just using like Post-it note sized pieces of colored paper that he had found at the store. But I think he came up with the idea that, man, if they were perforated like a real betting ticket that's been torn out of a book, like that would be super cool if we could figure out how to do that. I remember we came up with the idea of running the sheets of paper through Grandma's sewing machine with no thread on the needle. And it made absolutely perfect, consistent dots, so it didn't even look sloppy or hand done. It looked totally professional that it was perforated, and it was easy to tear the right half of it off as people placed their bets. And like I said, that didn't come back to me until seeing Charlie mention the Derby parties.
Yeah, there was something every year. The Derby party and the Reds opening game was always a big deal. They followed University of Cincinnati sports, and so during the basketball highlights.
Yeah.
And then in the summer, there was always a big summer party. And in fact, there were probably 4 or 5 during the summer of different groups of people, because most of these Cincinnati people came out to the farm and went fishing, and we had a big tent set up in case it rained in the barn and everything. So.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well,
Cool.
Let's get into this one.
Okay.
Dear Howard and Jane, beloved longtime friends, wonderful friends over the years, we'd like to wish Howard a wonderful 90th birthday on the 4th of I started to say August of April, and Howard and Jane, both of you, a wonderful, memorable anniversary sometime later. We've been, as I say, together a long time and have many, many memories that involve you too. And I think the very first one that Charlie and I could remember was, remember, honey, when we went to Howard and Jane's apartment in Bond Hill, and there was a party there, and they lived in this darling little apartment, and when we all came out of the party, there was a thick, thick fog, and we didn't know how we were going to get home. We were not, any of us were not married. It was just you two, remember, who were married. We didn't want to get compromised by getting home too late. Okay?
And then I remember, I don't know how much longer after that first party that we talked about, was when we all went to Evansville, Indiana, to the wedding of
Dick.
Dick and Donna, Ken Carson's
That's right.
son and daughter-in-law. And this is when the Glums were formed. So from then on, the people that the group attended that formed the Glums, the Grubers, Leevers, Uibles, Morrisons, etc.
Now I'm wondering, when was it that you all left town and went to Portsmouth? I think of all of our Glums outings as being after World War II. Am I right about that, Howard and Jane? You know better than we do. And getting back to Howard's birthday, remember how often we would go to the Reds opening game, and it was to say it coincided with your birthday, Howard? And then talking about opening games, do you remember the game that we went to when it was so cold? and the snow came down, and after about the third inning, we decided we were not any heroes and heroines, and we all went out to Whiting's, and Kay went in the kitchen, and she didn't have more than 2 cans of any one kind of camel soup, and she opened them and she dumped them all in a big pot, every can that she had, and got it good and hot, and meanwhile we were just shaking and practically blue, and that right away we had big bowls of this mixture of soups and Oreos, as I remember. Is that the way you guys remember?
Yeah, well, when you talk about mixing things together, I remember the tremendously large iron kettle that Howard suspended on a triangle at the farm. And when we would have the parties at the farm, we had burgoo parties, the real good old-fashioned Kentucky burgoo parties, where the burgoo was cooked almost all night long.
Honey, do you remember how Howard had a great big, I think it was like a shovel, or shaped like a shovel, and you got a little timetable, and that was when your time came up, you had to go up and stir the burgoo during the afternoon until it was done.
And I remember dishing out one of them in particular because we took a lot of pictures and as memories for the party. But I think it was Steve was dishing out the ice cream, and the shadow put a shadow across his elbow, and it looked like he had no elbow, and just the hand was reaching in and dishing that ice cream out by itself.
That was fun.
And that was just one of the many things that happened when we were all, of course, the kids were all growing up. They were either in preschool, grade school, or early high school.
The thing that was wonderful about those parties up at the farm was that everybody and his brother was there, plus all their begats. We didn't have any other parties much that had included the children. And of course the kids looked forward to going and being in the barn. And they looked with awe at that big hex sign that was on the front of the barn. And well, our kids in particular still remember and talk about that. And then there was the time you had the party in the farm, and at the end of summer, I believe, and it rained. And but you two are troopers, and so there was no calling the party off. We just had the party. We got a little squeezed in a bit, and all the little kids enjoyed. I think it was pumping the organ. You had a little organ that was not one of these fancy electric ones, but a little hand organ, and the rain was coming down outside, and we had music on the inside.
I remember at the farm there was these 2 boxes on either side of the fireplace where you stored the wood, and it was always amazing to me that instead of when I had to go out and keep the fire, I went out and got my firewood from outside. Howard just went over, and you went over and reached in that in those boxes, and the fire burned bright all night long. The grown folks played bridge, and
I'm not real sure that they didn't just yak, honey.
Well, maybe I don't know.
But
A
anyway,
long time ago.
yeah, our memory's getting a little fuzzy.
Yeah.
And talking about those 2 boxes alongside of the fireplace, honey. Remember when Jane and Howard went on their trip? I think it was to Tonga and New Zealand, etc. Anyway, they were gone a long time. And when she came back, she couldn't find her silverware. And she didn't find it for the longest time. And they didn't, and remember, Jane? And you didn't know whether you'd been robbed or what. And then finally, when it got to be cool weather and you were starting, Howard was going to you were going to build a fire, Howard opened up the whoopee, there's the silverware. Okay?
Yeah. The other series of parties that you two were famous for were your derby parties.
Oh,
I
yeah.
remember going in your apartment, and we always had a big sign on the front door.
Grandstand, was it?
No. Where did they saddle up the horses?
Paddock?
The paddock.
Yeah.
This is the paddock. And Churchill Downs for the derby. And we had our fun making up the bet slips and betting. And And until I'm not going to mention who it was, got mad and went home because it was a question of whether he had a 6 or a 9 on the sheet, and he was all upset about it because it was really just the opposite of what he thought it should have been.
Well, anyway,
And,
he wasn't
he
he wasn't a regular glum anyway.
We it didn't stop the party. The party went on.
We all-
All of course, when you had the Derby party, the mint juleps were the star of the party.
Yeah,
really
Howard
knew
made-
how to
he made-
make the mint juleps.
And always red roses on the dining room table. Because
So there are
That
many,
was-
many memories.
that's
And the trips we made to Louisville to follow the Bearcats playing basketball. So when they won 2 national championships in a row, and only missed the third one by 1 point. So we have lots and lots of memories together as a group.
not to speak of Brightleaf, although remember all the times we went to Brightleaf, Harrodsburg, played golf, and the gals yacked again, or else went antiquing or something like
Well,
that.
let's go back once to Kitty Connect.
Oh, good. Now, were Jane and Howard, were you at Kitty Connect?
Maybe they weren't. Maybe
I think
maybe
so.
you were at Portsmouth then, and you were not at Kitty Connect. But
Or
that was a Glum's party. That's when the Cohankes were with us.
Yeah, right. But that was long before we got to be glums, honey, that we were solidified in glums. So anyway, let me see, what else can we dredge up? Have we talked enough?
Okay, I just got it all. Okay.
Well, we want to bring up now the go back to the parties at the farm. The horseshoe tournament was always a biggie with the men, mostly the men. For some reason or other, we couldn't trust a girl to throw the horseshoes over the full length.
Oh, we are.
But anyway, that was good with the beer keg handy, and but even when we went to picnics in the park or other trips, the horseshoes were always in the back of the car, and that was a lot of fun.
A lot of rivalry.
Yeah. And Gene, you were talking about Mrs. Corkins.
Yes, I think we all felt like Mrs. Corkins was such a dear, and she added to those gatherings. She gave us the next generation, you know, that made there were 4 generations there. Or no, I guess it's only 3, Mrs. Corkins. 3. Anyway, she was friendly and but not intrusive. She was just a pleasant person to have around, and we look forward to seeing her and being with her.
So that's many of our memories of the Glums and
And
all
the Uibles in particular.
parties that we had together, and we always seemed to make our own fun, and that was such a nice thing about these parties. Everybody was friendly and sociable, and with all their little stories, and all the enough small children coming along that really made it a great affair. Howard, you had a fish pond up there at the farm,
Yes,
and that was always
that was fun.
we didn't catch much fish, but we had a lot of fun with the kids.
Maxine
Waiting
caught
on.
some kind of a big something or other. Remember one year, Jane, and when Howard, you remember she caught something that was big, and I don't remember if it was a turtle or it was not a fish, but I know she was tugging, and then finally this monster came up that you probably knew what it was, but we didn't.
Yeah, well, with that, Howard, I think we wish you the happy birthday on the 4th, and wish both you and Jane many more years of happiness together as fitting into a tremendous life of 2 people who were great friends of ours and a source of much happiness together in a very friendly family way.
Jane and Howard, we treasure your friendship. We have over many, many years, and we wishing you all the best in the years ahead.
So long for now.
Bye.
Well, that's very tough.
All right, Dan, who's up next?
Okay, we've got Tom and Barbara Duckworth there, and Tom and Barbara were Bethel, the Bethel Circle,
Yep, yep.
and Tom and Barbara owned a business in Bethel, Myers and Duckworth, fuel delivery, and they delivered propane and fuel, heating oil in particular, I think.
Yep.
And I think they still had some coal customers, I think, but they had a business in Bethel
Gotcha.
that they ran for a long time. And they also owned the Sunoco gas station in Bethel. So
Gotcha.
they were part of the Bethel group and came out for parties and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And my biggest memory of them was, as they're going to talk about here, is their fishing lake.
Yeah.
They owned a farm just on the edge of Bethel, probably a mile outside of Bethel.
Okay.
And a really nice old farmhouse that they had done, had rehabbed it, and really beautiful place back along a long driveway.
Yeah, I remember the driveway, and that the approach was awesome. It just you're driving up by the pond, and then you see the house on the hill. It was, like you can't have a better presentation for a house.
If I remember right, there was an apartment or a separate house up there that I think maybe some in-laws or some grandparents lived in at some point.
Yeah, yeah.
But then the lake, they had a beautiful lake. It was probably a good acre and a half, maybe even 2 acres. Big. It was not a farm pond. It was a true lake.
Right.
And he stocked it, and fishing was a big deal. And of course, he's going to refer to that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, of course, I mean that's what he's in mine and Cyrus's minds. I mean, it's the fishing. If you mention the name Duckworth, the very first thing that pops into my mind is fishing.
But even when you and Cy weren't there, Dad and Tom would go out there and they'd sit there for the afternoon and talk and have a few beers, and it was good people, good friends.
Yeah, it was awesome. It's such great memories fishing out there and spend, because they would come out and eat lunch with us, so it wasn't that we were just there for the lake. They would spend a significant chunk of their afternoon having sandwiches with us and talking.
So they were a big part of the Bethel culture. So.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay.
All right, let's get into it.
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, Hal. I'm Jane. We're glad to be included in this, and we wish Hal a happy birthday, and Jane and Hal happy anniversary. And we have many happy thoughts of you people. You're so kind to us and have been so good. I remember one time you always included us in parties, and she did such lovely parties. Everything was just lovely. And so one time we asked them out, and Cyrus and Darius, to fish. We had fish fry. Tom said, we'll catch fish for fish fry. Well, they didn't catch any fish.
Had to change our menu.
I was so embarrassed. I had a soft hamburger and make hamburgers. But
It was good though,
yes, and they were very gracious about it. And we enjoyed many times with them. And I think that's about my extent. Love them both.
Tom, you were talking about Darius catching some fish and not winning.
Yeah, I think Hal run over 3 or 4 times on fish. And they'd catch a few, but this one day there, I think he caught about 6 big bass, 2.5, 3 pound catfish. And I wanted to clean them for him, and he wouldn't let me because he had to take them to potato to shop. That was all there is to it. But getting back to Barbara's story about the fish fry, I always was able to catch fish out. You know that, you've been over here. And, call up and call them houses up and have come over. Have a fish fry. Houses. Your mother and dad brought your 2 boys out. And, we're just going to catch fish. And never got a bite. So it happened. Now I guess really, we had a good time at ball games. We went to several ball games together, always down. Didn't seem anyone was going to always have a good time. And it's always been a pleasure to know both of you people, and you've been the nicest people I've ever known, nicest couple. Always friendly and always
willing to do anything that would send you by. But it's just been great. Shut her off a while.
No, no, I want to say that I love you both very much.
Didn't they come down to the mountain one time?
Yes, one day they're twice. I forgot.
Well, when we was building down there.
Why don't you tell that story about getting on the bus or something?
Yeah, I guess you remember the time that we went on the bus trip at Anderson Hills Historical Society. Went to Old Salem, and come back, and we tried to get Jane to help build the house, but she wouldn't get out.
No,
She wouldn't go in
She wouldn't climb up. We had to
because we
climb
didn't have
up.
the steps in yet. But Al got up and explored the house and around, and then we came back and enjoyed that. And enjoyed having you on your 83rd birthday. We're still disgusted because you didn't stay long. Because we really didn't get to show you everything we wanted to show you.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think I want to see it.
Okay.
I always remember when you and I was playing, we're going to race to see who would get the English peas in first. The first mess of English peas. I always enjoyed it when you lived in Hyde Park, down on Madison Road, bringing you down First Vegetable. I'm sure you enjoyed it. And I still hope to put one in this May and be able to bring you down to the First Vegetable. Even if you haven't got a place to cook it. What the cook to go for you.
Well, he's got a little kitchen.
Yeah.
They have a nice little kitchen.
I don't think they're going to do a lot of cooking. But as I always say, it's just been a pleasure. I'm glad you accepted us, and it's been a pleasure doing books. And we wish you a very happy birthday, Al. A very happy anniversary to both of you. And Jane, you take care of us. And when we get back from North Carolina.
Okay, coming up here now, we've got Cyrus.
Yeah, this one's easy.
And Cy needs no introduction here, but for the few people who might be watching us who don't know the family very well.
Yep, very well.
Cy is my oldest son. He was born in 1977. And he's going to tell the story way better than what I could tell him.
Yeah, exactly.
But one of the greatest pleasures that I have from that whole period was the fact that you guys were there at a time that you got to know Mom and Dad.
Yeah.
On a very personal level.
Yeah. We spending those like full weekends with them as often as we did, I think was key. That it wasn't always go have them babysit us for 2 hours.
Yeah.
It was we did a full weekend fairly regularly, and yeah, we got awfully darn close with them over those weekends.
So. And they were the kind of people that reacted and became a part of your lives. And like you say, not a babysitter.
Yeah.
Because there were so many times that I had to be out of town. And so they would come pick you up and stay at their place. And I remember they took you down to the Kentucky Horse Park a couple of times when you were younger.
Yeah.
There were just many things in there.
Oh, exactly. And they loved the state park lodges. So anything from Houston Woods to Carter Caves to everything in between, they made it a point to take us to those places too. So yeah, it was cool to get to spend such a big amount of quality time.
And I don't know who enjoyed it more, whether it was you or them, but they sincerely had great pleasure from it. And Cy's going to tell the story very well here.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's hear it in his words.
Yeah, I like it.
Hey, Grandpa, happy birthday. I'm sorry I can't be there today. I'm probably doing some homework and studying really hard, but I wanted to wish you a happy 90th birthday. And I also wanted to wish you and Grandma happy 63rd anniversary. Dad's putting this tape together about people saying nice messages to you. I figure I'd probably join in and say a few words about you, Grandpa, and I guess you and Grandma. You guys have been really important to me my whole life. When I think of the perfect grandparents, I don't even think that comes close to what you guys are. My fondest memories of when I was a little kid, Grandpa, probably have come from times when you took Darius and I out to go fishing and all kinds of different stuff. I remember, especially at the time that your grandpa, you took us to that park in Hyde Park. I can't remember which park it was, but I remember there was a big hill called Suicide Hill. And I remember that Darius and I would fly down the hill and out into the street and just hurt ourselves repeatedly. And that was back when you lived at the big house on Observatory. And I remember that was really neat. And I also like to think about all the times, Grandpa, when you and Grandma would take us down to the dam on the river, and we'd have picnics all the time.
Didn't you go flying kites a lot too?
Oh yeah, we'd fly kites a lot. Probably, I remember we had like the homemade reel that you had, and we'd fly kites all the time. Probably the neatest thing I remember, Grandpa, was the times we all went fishing. I remember going out to Duckworth's place, fishing for bluegill. I remember a time when I think we caught 20 bluegill, and I insisted that we keep them all. We came back with a gallon-sized bucket full of bluegill. It just smelled bad. It didn't really do anything, but we ended up throwing them away, I think. But I remember that was a whole lot of fun. I also remember a time we caught a big catfish out of Duckworth's place. I actually brought it back to the house here and cooked it. Man, those times were just so fun, Grandpa. I can't emphasize how lucky I was to have someone like you to take me out to places like that. All the times we played cards together. I don't know how many games of hearts we would play. I remember when you guys tried to teach me how to play bridge. I never did quite get it, but we tried. But playing golf, playing concentration, all this, I don't know how many days we spent playing cards down at your place.
Didn't you stay down there a few nights when you were in St. Xavier, and they would take you over the next morning when I was busy? And
oh, sure. I stayed there.
Pick you up after school a lot?
Sure. They'd pick me up from school whenever they needed me to.
In fact, wasn't there a bus line that he took you to, or you?
Well, that was Darius.
Was it? Okay.
I took the bus line. But, I remember they'd show up at my games. Grandpa, especially, you'd show up at all my basketball games whenever you could. My concerts in band when I was in band. My concerts at Batavia when I was, in band there. My basketball games there. There's just so many fond memories I have, Grandpa. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, just a few other things, Grandpa, I also remember. I remember one thing was a library in Hyde Park that you used to take us to all the time. I remember they had the goldfish down in the kids' room. And you used to take us there all the time, walking through the old Hyde Park, the courtyard area, I guess, in downtown there. When we lived at Observatory. I remember Grandma's cooking, definitely. She always used to say, I made your favorite, Cyrus, every time I'd come down there. I remember the spaghetti dinners, the apple pies she would make, the mashed potatoes, the best mashed potatoes I've ever had. I remember the custard desserts we would have, just so many things. Breyer's ice cream. All that stuff down at the big house and down at Brandon House. And even now where you're at now. Grandpa, I remember all the games of pool we used to play, especially at the Brandon House. I love pool now, and I'll probably play pool the rest of my life. Grandpa, you're probably the first person that just introduced me to it. Those are memories I'll never going to forget. Yeah, and tell you what, that's probably the last of the things I was going to mention for the tape. I can't emphasize enough how much both of you mean to me. Really. I think I've had the best grandparents in the world than you guys. You guys have always been there for me. You've always been supportive. Never missed a birthday. Never missed a holiday. I think when the definition of family, I really think of you guys. And, I can only hope that I can be the same way with my grandkids. And, my father can be the same way with my kids. If that works out to even close to how you guys have been to me, I'll be really happy. Once again, have a very happy anniversary, Grandpa and Grandma and Grandpa. A wonderful birthday on your 90th. I'll be thinking about you. Good.
Okay, coming up here, we've got Darius.
Yeah.
And Darius is number 2 son,
Yep.
born in 1980. And just like in Cy's section, he's going to relay the stories way better than I could, because you lived it, and you can tell from the stories that it tells, there's a very special relationship there
Yep. Yep.
that you can't duplicate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think he says it very well.
Yeah, yeah, and thankfully this version of me remembers the stories a lot better than I do now, so I'm glad. It's kind of fun to hear some of those details that had definitely slipped my mind.
There was one story I know Mom told me over and over again, and I don't remember where it was. I think it was at one of the state parks or maybe the Kentucky Horse Park, but you were still in a stroller that they took you down.
Mm-hmm.
And you were probably, I'm going to say, 4, 5, 6 at the time, maybe. And there was a long set of stairs.
Yeah.
And you were in a little push stroller.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they pushed you down all these stairs, one step at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. Just letting it kind of flop from one step.
Click. And you started laughing after about a couple of steps there. Mm-hmm. And every time you went down another step, you would laugh
just
like
laugh
crazy.
Hysterically.
And by the time they got to the bottom, you were almost exhausted from laughing.
Yeah.
And Mom
awesome.
said, I have never seen a happier child who had got that much pleasure out of coming down the steps.
That is so funny.
She told me that story over and over again.
Yeah.
So it's as we mentioned with Cy, it's really, really special with me that you got to know them so well.
Yeah.
Because you did not get to know Mom's side of the family.
Right.
Because they were all passed away by the time you came around.
Yeah.
The Corkins side. So it's I'm really thankful that this has got recorded. So
Yeah. Me too. And
for posterity.
Yeah, exactly. And there's such good memories there. I hadn't thought about the wires in forever. For anybody that's watching, all it was is a box of extension cords and some like little plug splitters, and I was just endlessly fascinated with just stringing them around the apartment.
Well,
and I would just, oh look, I got lights in 4 different rooms, all wired to this one switch right here, so you can turn this on, and you're turning on lights in all those other rooms. And it's the silliest thing, but man, I'd do that for hours. And I'd just reroute what's plugged into what all over the apartment.
And they never complained that you were unplugging lights and moving things around.
Yeah, exactly. Those were fun. I hadn't thought about it, and I had not thought about the frisbee either for a long time. I forgot that like that was where I learned to actually throw one fairly well. Was he did? Yes, I was dumb, and I just would throw it as hard as I can. It wouldn't go to him. I would do it over and over. But I did eventually get it, and it was from Grandpa. And man, I got to where I was pretty good, to where like when I would then start playing Ultimate Frisbee in college, I found pretty quickly that man, I had above average throw for a new player, but it was because we had spent a lot of hours throwing frisbees at the park.
Well, from back to the wires, from my perspective, it's been so neat to see all those extension cords, those little switches back in Mom and Dad's bedrooms and living room and kitchen and all that, to see what you've learned to enjoy in your life now.
Yeah.
And all the video work.
Exactly.
And when I go to some of your shows that you put together, and there's 5 cameras and 3 speakers and all kinds of connectors and everything, and I see the board you put together, and it's just a spaghetti of wires, and everything's in the same place.
Yeah.
I said, well, that seed was planted
exactly
about 30 years ago.
It is funny because I've never thought to compare the two before until you mentioned that. Mm-hmm. But it really is. It's just a grown up version of it.
Yeah.
And we run typically about a mile of cable at these shows, and it's incredible. And I really do get that sort of same giddy joy out of really wiring up a big show.
Well, it's fun for me to watch it. But,
it is neat.
In the interview here, you expressed very well the personal relationship with mom and dad, and
Mm-hmm.
I congratulate you for
Yeah.
being able to express those feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Those are can never be duplicated.
No. Awesome. All right. Well, let's get into this one.
Okay.
All right, Grandpa, I just want to wish you a happy 90th birthday. And to you and Grandma, a happy 63rd anniversary. I think it's pretty impressive that you guys have racked up 63 years together. And I don't think a day goes by that I don't realize like how great you guys are. And I think about both of you a lot. And I honestly can't think of a better set of grandparents that I'd rather have. Kind of going over some of the memories that we've had together. One of the things I just thought of is the classic wires at the big house, or your place on the observatory, when I used to love stringing all your lights up to the same plug, or any other crazy idea I could come up with. I think that definitely had a role in the way I love to play with wires still today. And I think you wouldn't be surprised if you saw my dorm room, because there are definitely lots of wires up there also. Another big thing for me was fishing. And I don't think I'm ever going to forget the day at Duckworth's Pond when you and Si and I caught pretty much equally big catfish. I'd say they were, I don't know, about that long. Man, they were huge. And I remember seeing you and Si start to clean them in the basement. And all I know is that I wasn't there when everybody ate them. I hope they were good, but everybody decided they couldn't wait for me to get back from wherever I was, so they went ahead and ate them for dinner. Also, another big memory of mine is our Frisbee days. And I still have the actual Frisbee that we used to take to Alt Park. And I'm sure you remember it all too well when you tried to teach me how to throw a Frisbee. And I think pretty much every time I threw it as hard as I could, and it never came anywhere near you. And I don't think I ever heard you complain. Besides, oh, I don't know, you think you should do a little better next time. And then you just easily walk on over and pick up the Frisbee and throw it back to me. To yet again have me throw it in the woods or wherever I could reach. And it got a little farther and farther every year as I got stronger. But those are some of my best memories that I think I've ever had with the two of you.
Or
Yeah.
here's something like that.
I got a few other memories here that involve you, Grandma. One of my oldest ones is when we made candy houses when I was little. And I still remember exactly what my house looked like. And I know that Si and I both lined our roofs with Necco wafers. And I wouldn't be surprised if part of that was Dad's doing, with his love for Necco wafers. And another big thing for me was when you used to sit at the kitchen table at Observatory and play War, the card game, with me for hours. I don't know how long we played, and now I can only imagine how bored you might have been. But I remember you stayed with it, and we would play and play, and usually until it was time for a meal, whatever meal was coming up. And I can just remember playing forever, being excited the whole time while you sat there and had a nice smile on your face and just kept playing with me. Another big memory I have is from coming over to visit you guys a lot during high school. I remember before I could start driving to school, I came over to your guys' place a lot, and I loved it. I used to have a great time over there because it was a nice change of pace from coming home and going to school every day to be able to come to your guys' place. And Grandpa always had interesting plants that he was growing to show me. And I could always pretty much guarantee that there was going to be a good meal involved every time I came over. But I'm definitely never going to forget like those days that I came over, especially when you guys used to come pick me up after band camp or after marching band practice after school. I remember coming over pretty often then. A lot of times pretty tired, and you guys were always nice, and you'd always ask me every day like exactly what we did in band practice, and you would want to know everything that's going on. And thank you for that, because it helped a lot, because it was nice to have someone that was interested to explain things to.
What about being a waiter at the Seasons?
Yeah, definitely a big highlight of high school was being a waiter at Seasons. Yeah, I don't know how much I enjoyed the actual job itself, but I know I loved the people that I worked with, and I also loved the people that we served there at Seasons. Yeah, that was definitely a great experience. I had a good time while I was there, and I say that definitely it was one of the high points of my high school career. All right, Grandpa. Didn't think I could let this opportunity go to relive the great memory one more time. So I thought we'd take a little trip back to Alt Park here and probably turn it back about 10 years and remember the days when you tried to teach me how to throw a frisbee, but I, for some reason, refused to listen. So I think that pretty much sums up a Darius Uible classic throw at about 8 years old. I just want to take this opportunity to congratulate you guys one more time on your 63rd anniversary. And Grandpa, I want to say congratulations on a 90th birthday. I want to say that I love you guys a whole lot. And I hope that you guys have a great time.
All right. Dad, who we got next?
We've got Bob and June Frame.
Yep.
Bob and June were the Bethel Circles.
Mm-hmm.
And Bob grew up in Adams County out in West Union.
Mm-hmm.
And their family had a department store out there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when the small little country towns all had their own department stores.
Yep.
And so he was expanding, or a brother took over or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so he and June moved into Bethel.
Mm-hmm.
And they opened up a little department store.
Mm-hmm.
And, women's clothing, men's clothing.
Yep.
And kind of a upper scale for a small little country town.
Gotcha.
And they always had nice displays in the windows, and it was a classy kind of a place.
Mm-hmm.
And so they ran that for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And June helped them in the store, I know, a lot. And I remember Mom would do some shopping there, and they have fitting rooms and stuff, for the newest fashions and things.
Mm-hmm.
And then June became the teacher at Bethel High School, and she was a home ec teacher.
Okay.
Which they don't even have anymore. So.
Yeah, I think those have pretty much been done away with. They still had it when I was in school.
Did
but,
they?
Yeah.
Okay. So she taught sewing and cooking and home ec skills, and she did that for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Now their house was exactly across the street from the Bethel High School, which has been torn down now for a long time. And because of their background in the store and decoration, their house was always beautiful.
That makes sense.
Christmas decorations were always super. And you could tell that Mom and June had a lot in common when it came to decorating and ideas, and that comes out in these interviews a lot. And the other thing was that their house was the only house that I know of that was a Sears and Roebuck house.
Okay.
There was a time where Sears and Roebuck was the retailer of the country.
They sold an awful lot of those kits, I know.
And these were do-it-yourself kits that they would sell, and you order it, and it had everything there. And I don't remember if Sears had their own people who put it together, or if you got local people.
Or if you just had to hire
remember.
a carpenter, yeah.
But I have read, I think National Geographic had a nice article. This was years and years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
About how many they sold and how many different models there were.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that Frames was the only one that I knew that had a Sears house.
Yeah, that's awesome.
They had 2 boys. They were both younger than me, and so they were part of the Bethel Circle. And as Dad retired, he played more and more golf, and Bob refers to this a lot. Mm-hmm. So they did a lot of trips together. And
yeah.
This is once again, it's outside of the Cincinnati Circle. This is the Bethel Circle.
Yeah.
And Bob was a local businessman, very successful. Struggled as the economy was changing and the world was changing.
Yeah.
You started having shopping centers come up, and it was awful hard to survive a department store in town.
Yeah.
So finally, I think he saw the writing on the wall, and it was time to retire anyway.
Yeah. Just go ahead and shut it down.
So let's hear the story in their words.
Yeah, I like it.
Okay.
Hi, Jane and Hal. This is June wishing you happy birthday to Hal and a happy anniversary to both of you. We just thought we'd sit here and recall some of the fun times we've had in the past years, and maybe you'd like to relive a few of them with us. Maybe start with the one that was your big 50th anniversary gift when we took a safari and we crossed the countryside from morning till night. We packed picnic lunches and all the beverages it took to get us from here to there. We started out about 10 o'clock in the morning, and we were at Observatory Avenue, and there you were, ready to depart. We ended up in Whitewater Park for lunch, in Lawrenceburg for refreshment, in Fernbank for dinner, and on the top of the hill in Price Hill overlooking everything at Carl Garnier's home. I'm sure you remember it all. Now I'm going to turn it over to Bob because I've got so many memories I'd capture the whole day.
Remember, we signed up for a trip to Adams County, and you were looking forward to that because that, of course, is where I came from. And we had signed up toward it, and lo and behold, they canceled because there was not enough people who wanted to go on. So I told you that anytime you wanted to go, we would go up there, and I personally escort you around the county. So the time came, and we got all fixed up. But Jane fixed a nice picnic lunch for us, and we started out, and we went from past the first governor of the state of Ohio, Mr. Kirker, and his house there, and went on over to Tranquility and up to Locust Grove, and went clear up on top of the mound there that's in their cemetery, and what a view we had there. From there we went down through Peebles, and Peebles went down to West Union and stopped at the lake down there and had our picnic lunch in that little park. And then we went through West Union and went east on 125 to Blue Creek. In Blue Creek we turned and went up Churn Creek. And it was hot. Man, it was hot that day. And they had rain, and the steam was absolutely rising off the road because it was so hot. And we thought, well, let's stop at this little country store there and see if we can't get us a cold drink. So we did. And we went in, and of course, there's only one light burning in that place. And as we came to the front door, lights started coming on, and the clerk came forward and was turning the lights on, see, because we were potential buyers of some kind or another. Anyway, she said, "Why, Mr. Frame, what are you doing here?" And I still think that Al thought that was something else. But she happened to be a clerk that we had in our store in West Union. She knew me. That's what. Anyway, we went up to Sunshine Ridge and went on down to the river and to Manchester. And I don't know whether we stopped at Moyer's for dinner that evening or not.
We probably did. We couldn't have done without beverage.
There's a laundry up there, and how we stopped up there many times, you know, in our golfing experiences. Have you got something to say now?
Oh, I could talk forever.
We've had a lot
I'll
of
put a
experience.
capsule version of a few little goodies in right now. One day we decided to, on invitation to the two fellows, that namely was Bob and Hal, to go to Wilmington to the dedication of the Nike base up there. Hal was driving, and I'm not too sure, it couldn't have been the Carmen Gia, but it might have been something equivalent to. And as we drove in to the base, lo and behold, everybody was going this way. And we kept thinking, my, this is an auspicious occasion. We're getting all kinds of
Red carpet treatment.
And finally, the one gentleman walked up to the car and he said, "You are the Secretary of State, aren't you?" Lo and behold, it was Hal. Unfortunately, we were seated with the rest of the ordinary people that day. That was a fun day. Now, if I must extend a little farther, Jane, I want you to remember the days when we went to Cincinnati and pretended that we were good at embroidery and assorted little talents. And we spent one day waiting for the bridge to fall in the Ohio River. I think it was the C&O Bridge.
Huh?
And we started out early, and we plunked ourselves up on the flood wall, and we waited, and it only took, 5 seconds, and the bridge was in the water. But it was quite a momentous occasion. Now, Bob, you go back to your little goodies.
Remember all those nice golf games we had? We were all duffers. We did pretty well occasionally and bragged about it. And I'll never forget the time we were up to White Oak, and we took Hauser with us that time. Joe was, he's always been a bragger. Anyway, we got around to the third tee, which you have to drive off across a pond to come back to the clubhouse, and then you go with the rest of the holes from there. And I said, by gosh, I sure hope that I can do it this time. Because Hauser was always like to brag about his game. I teed up, hit that ball, went right straight over and was in about a foot of the hole. I went in, I had a birdie on it.
Wow.
And I said, well, not too bad. But we had a lot of fun. We went up to West Virginia, played the golf course up there. We played the golf course down at Manchester. And we played the golf course down on the levee in Cincinnati. Reeves, I think it's called. And our favorite course, of course, was the White Oak. We practically owned the course because when we got on, we were the only people there. And for lunch, we'd stop in and get a fish sandwich at their little clubhouse. And it was delightful. And a lot of camaraderie, 4 games. I'll never forget Tucker walking across the dam there, right outside the clubhouse. And a puff of wind came along, and he had a nice Panama hat, and it just into the brink. Well, he says, there goes Jess. He's trying to get up some golf balls. All you can see is his hat.
I'd like to tell one on you, Steve.
Uh-oh.
Mentioning the golf balls. Do you remember when you and Stevens captured all the golf balls up at White Oak?
Yeah.
Does that bring back a memory?
Washed them in Steven's washing machine.
Yes.
Put them all in there.
You've never heard that story.
And then we sold them then.
You
Uh-huh.
want to take a break on this
Yeah.
for a minute?
Oh,
A lot of good golfing experiences, Hal. I remember we would stretch them out once in a while. Bring in a few extra things besides golfing. And one of the times we went up to the Brush Creek Winery. Remember that? Oh man, that's a wild place up there. that old barn. We had to go down underneath and get the wine. And Jess would tell us the stories about he and Tuck when they went there and posed themselves as inspectors. And they said to him when he said, "Well, I'm an inspector. I don't want to pay the entrance fee for their festivities." He says, "Forget it. We don't let anybody get in here for free." And they met some fellow and Chuck passed for one of the hillbillies people that was really somebody that played the guitar and read so and so. Anyway, I remember one of the times too, we stopped in Moyer's and we had a bottle around, I think, because the table was full of bottles before we left. And we started down the road, and I think we stopped in at every bar that was on the way, and went in and gassed a little bit. Went down to Ripley and went into the hotel there, and went to the bar, and Tuck knew the bartender. Then we went from there on down to Higginsport, and I think it was on the way that I was driving the Chrysler at that time, the LeBaron, and they had a roof that rolled back. Jess was standing up, his head out the thing, standing up in the car and yelling at everybody who get fast. Wonder we didn't get stopped. But anyway, when we got home, Bethel, Jess said, "That's why Jane called and wanted to know where in the world you were because we were late." Well, Hal had just arrived. Of course, he went home immediately. But we stopped one time up at Russellville and picked strawberries. I don't remember that or not. From strawberry zone. That was one of the good times.
You're ready to pick up on some fun with Jane now. Jane and I have shared a lot of crafts and a lot of fun with her friends, and one of them was a Christmas get-together or pre-Christmas get-together, and I can only remember one person from Cincinnati, and that was Max Morrison, although I know there were others. And we were making angels, and everybody brought their craft materials, and we fashioned these angels. From a spin-off from that little craft project, Bob and I, in turn, took the idea and created a life-size angel for a decorating motif in our store for Christmas time. And believe it or not, just because of this little angel that we did at your kitchen table, we created one that was 7 feet tall, I assume. But it was fun. Then Jane, Hal, think of all those gourmet dinners we had. My goodness, I bought cookbooks I haven't looked at since. Anyway, some of them that stand out in my memory might be the one that was the Amish theme. When we women dressed like we were from yesteryear and the men were goaded into doing the same thing. I think they let their hair grow a little longer and their beards maybe a day old. And as we approached the house, we were instructed we could not come in the same entry. The women had to come in one way and the men the other. Needless to say, we all got together before the occasion ended. Now, I can't think of another one in a hurry, so Steve, turn that off.
The highlight parties at your place was always the shooting fest in the fall of the year. We'd go out and shoot at clay pigeons out back of the barn. We always had a good time. We had a big keg of beer down there by the pond and really turned it on. And we never had a visit to your house and a party, but what we made a trip to the reading room. Remember that, Hal? All those nice pictures you had in there and all the nice magazines. I'll let you guess what it was.
We women were never allowed in, so I'll never know what was in that reading room.
For the male population.
Anyway, we've had fun recalling all the good times and all the fun things that happened together. And here's a toast to both of you.
Here's to your 90th, Hal. Many more.
And here's to your happy wedding anniversary, Hal and Jane.
And remember that friends may come and friends may go.
But don't you dare finish that
And
one
friends
out.
may peter out, you know. I'll be your friend through thick or thin. Peter out or Peter in. How about that for a climax?
That's a good one. I like that.
All right, Dan, who do we have next?
Okay, we've got Joe and Marge Hauser here.
Mhm.
They're part of the Bethel Circle,
Yeah.
and we were close to Joe. And just a little bit of his background. He owned the local grocery store, which was right in the middle of Bethel. It was a white villa, which is out of business now.
Okay.
But he owned that, and his father-in-law, Simcox, owned it. It was called
Okay.
H&S Supermarket.
Okay.
And then Joe took over as a young man, and Mr. Simcox worked there for a long time, and eventually he retired and
Okay.
passed away then.
Okay.
And Joe kept it, and he worked very hard at it. It was very successful, and so he was always hiring a high school student
Yeah. Yeah.
to work there, and those students would sweep the floors, and we carried out groceries for the people who parked along the street.
Yeah,
There was
yeah.
no parking lot then. And Howard got a job there, which Joe's going to talk about.
Yeah.
And he worked there for a couple of years or so in high school. And then there were some others that came on, and then I came on
Yeah.
a few
When you
years
were
later.
appropriate age.
And I did exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And I remember Joe always talked about how he would choose who to hire.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember you telling me this as a kid. I'll never forget it. But go ahead.
Yeah.
Tell it for everybody else.
And his story was, he said, I always hire the busiest kid in school. He said,
Yeah.
I want to find the kid who's in band, he plays football, he plays baseball, he's in the drama club, he's in everything. And I remember saying, well, why would you want that person? They're so busy, they don't have time to work.
Yeah.
He said, those people I can trust.
Yeah.
And he said, the person who's not in anything, he said, I don't hire him.
Yeah.
And so Howard worked there, had a great relationship.
Yeah.
And it was because of him that Mom and Dad became friends with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they met Mom and Dad because their son was working there.
So they had not crossed paths before that, before he asked for a job.
No, and that was pretty early on to their...
Okay, so they probably hadn't even been here very long.
Yeah, I would say 5, 6, 8 years or so. I'd have to
Gotcha.
figure out what year it
Gotcha.
actually was. But that's how the connection, which helped Mom and Dad know the Bethel Circle. Than,
Yeah, yeah.
than
Well-
other.
Well, yeah, I got to think at that point, at that year, if you know the guy that owns the grocery store in town, that's a big in for meeting other people in
Yeah.
town. Once you're in that
And
circle.
then Bob and Bob Frame and June were good friends because they had the store just two stores down the street.
Okay.
The department store.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Duckworth had the fuel store. So that circle grew then. And one thing it was interesting about Joe, and I really respect him for this, is that he joined the Army in World War II very young, and maybe he lied about his age or something.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
he went in very young, 14, 15, 16, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And was overseas and saw a lot of battles.
Yeah.
And came back from World War II and still a young man.
Yeah, yeah.
And then started working with his father-in-law in the grocery store.
Yeah, yeah.
And so he had quit high school when he joined the Army. And that's why I know he was very young.
Yeah, yeah.
So he had this successful business, but he always felt like he missed something by not completing high school. So his store, the grocery store, was only a half a block away from the high school.
Yeah.
So he walked over to the high school as he
Yeah.
had a child, Linda, at the time.
Yeah.
And he went over there and took the high school classes along with all the young kids. He was the only adult in there. There was no adult education classes.
Yeah, you didn't have all these community colleges options.
Nothing like
the
that.
way you do now.
And so I don't know how many classes he took, but he took the same thing that everybody else got.
And finished.
And he graduated.
Yeah,
and
that's so
was,
neat.
That was something he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then a couple years later, he decided, he said, I never got to go to college either.
Yeah.
And so Dad was working down at the library, so he was driving every day downtown.
Yeah, yeah.
And so Joe would ride with him every day, and Dad would drop him off at UC.
Yeah.
And he would take his classes and then come home with Dad. And he did that because he doubled up classes. I mean, he was working really hard.
Yeah.
And he ended up getting his degree from UC.
Yeah.
As an adult.
Yeah.
And that was not common. And he didn't have to do it because he already had a good business.
Yeah, he was set on a track.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, to want something like that, that's really cool.
But I always respected him on that. And then as he and Dad became good friends, he would come out to the farm quite often, not every weekend, but pretty often.
Yeah.
And shooting was a big deal.
Yeah.
And target practice and clay pigeons and stuff. And they took trips together. And Linda was 1 year younger than me.
Okay.
And Marjorie was always there, and she loved the stuff at Mom and Dad with the cooking and the stuff. And she and June Frame were good friends too.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's a little bit about them.
No, that is neat. I don't have many early memories of these guys, but I do remember when I was in high school, I had a history teacher that offered extra credit if you interviewed anyone that had fought in any war and then wrote a report about it. And knowing my academic history, you won't find it surprising that I needed extra credit in history. So I think I had either I told you that this was on offer, or maybe the teacher told you in a conference. And so I remember that you had said, well, Grandpa knows a few people that fought in wars, so that this should be easy. You'd be able to find them. So then it was Grandpa set me up with Joe, and then I spent like a Sunday afternoon talking to him all about it. And now, man, I wish I had video of the two of us interacting. But we had a great afternoon where he just told me everything he could remember. And I'm fairly certain that we did discuss in that interview him lying about his age to get in. I'm pretty sure that was part. I don't remember much from the day at this point, but that was discussed.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. Joe was a very smart, very talented. I remember as he retired, he got into woodworking, and his woodworking was just incredible. Yeah, he had all the equipment and everything.
Yeah,
but there was another story that was interesting. He had this little grocery store in Bethel, small little country town. Mm-hmm. It was the only grocery store in town.
Yeah.
Well, Kroger, which is the big, it was even big back in those days, bought out a piece of land on the edge of town with a big parking lot and everything, and came into town.
Yeah.
And the thought was, well, they're going to drive Joe out of business.
Yeah, yeah. He can't beat him.
He can't compete with that.
Yeah.
And so instead, he doubled down and remodeled his store.
Yeah.
And expanded it. I think he bought out the store next to him and expanded on it. And so Kroger came into town. Of course, everybody went down there, the big superstore.
Everyone checked it out, yeah.
And he was so good at personal relationships. You know, we carried groceries out for people.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, Mrs. Abbott, you know, it's good to see you. Man, you're looking good today. And, and he's, I'll order that special for you.
Yeah, yeah.
And a few years later, Kroger closed up and they left town.
Yeah.
And I've never heard that happen before.
Yeah, that has to be exceeding. I mean, I'm sure they know that there have been failures, but it has to be rare because I can't think of any other examples around here where they moved in and then ended up giving up on a town and moving out.
Couldn't compete with the local guy. But it was a great relationship, and he was a great boss when I worked for him, and I guess that cemented my relationship. I was closer to Joe than I was almost anybody else.
Yeah.
Because of that relationship.
Yeah, from having worked with him.
And he taught me a lot about business and how to take care of people and how to be polite to people and get what they want. And, I learned a lot from him.
That is neat.
So let's hear it in your own words.
Yeah, let's see it.
How we first met. If you recall, it's when Steve or Champ come in to get a job at the store. and he was too young. He told me he could do anything better than anyone else could do it. And
Really young.
he really put me in a spot. And I said, well, there's no way that I could hire you unless I talked to your parents. So we come out and got together, and we talked about whether he could do the work, and he interrupted us quite often, telling he could do more than anybody I had around there, and better than what they could do it anyhow. Al said, well, if he wants the job, why, it's all right with me. We'll manage somehow and go from there.
And that started a very, very lovely friendship. You are two of the most gracious people that I know of. And that's my show.
I'm going to hate to stop this a minute. Okay.
Okay. Hal and Jane, just want to tell you how wonderful your friendship has been. And it started when we met, when Champ wanted a job with us. I can remember the wonderful burgers. And Jane, your Christmas cookies, I've never had any like them. And your graciousness.
How about all the parties with our what do we call the gourmet group?
Oh, yes.
We met and we would meet, and I remember after you got back from Japan in particular, when we had a Japanese dinner, I think upstairs, and everybody had to put their legs under the table. And
we could do that then.
It was a little easier. And I guess what comes into my mind most is you hauling me back and forth to Cincinnati, and are constantly either smoking or not smoking, and going from cigarettes to pipe, and how bad the pipe would taste, and how we consider throwing the pipe away and going back to cigarettes. We'd stop on the way to UC at the coffee shop down on Eastern Avenue, and the coffee was the only thing worse than the tobacco juice. I don't suppose you remember these.
Well, I wasn't with you.
No.
But I heard about it.
I really don't know.
I can remember trips to where we used to go, French Lick, too.
Yes.
They were fun. Don't even have any pictures in there, I don't believe.
No, but I remember.
You remember it, Hal and Jane. You'll remember it.
Oh, yes. I remember talking to Jane. She was sitting on the side of the bed talking away and had a couple of 3 drinks. And the next thing I looked around, I was talking to nobody. And I guess
it was that time.
Yeah, last week got her and away she went.
She may not want to remember those. Okay, I can remember the burgers. I remember the little screen gazebo, I guess it was, that they had.
Redigging the lake
Mm-hmm.
and fishing out there. Yeah. Hal's garden behind the barn out there, and in particular his workshop, which is very neat. And actually, I don't think he used it for anything except to mess around in. He enjoyed it. Maybe Hal, you remember it.
Okay.
I've about run down.
Would you like to reminisce about some of the parties? What were those called?
The gourmet party. It was the gourmet club.
Gourmet club.
4 of us? I can't remember.
4 couples. Rawlings and Frames, Uibles, and House.
And the Japanese party was an outstanding party upstairs.
At the farm.
Yes. The food was terrible to me. I had to greet it, or my wife would have killed me. Everything was delicious.
Remember, we all sat around on the floor, our legs crossed, and something was served with raw egg in it.
Yes.
And everybody tried it.
Yes.
poured something hot soup or something. Maybe it was a kind of soup that they make. I don't
Egg dumpling soup of some sort, but I can't remember just exactly what it was.
Jane will remember. You think about it, Jane.
I guess another thing that come in was at one time, to my memory, was at one time when Tommy Crane was going with his wife, and the girls all got together and planned a party out at Shug Jones's house. And June Frame always wanted to do things up, really butter it up, as you will.
Well.
Right, and when we got there, June says, I'm going to really tear him up with this. So she borrowed everyone's silver. So there was silver everything.
That wasn't Jane and Hal's. They were there.
They were there, but it was...
I remember one of the gourmet parties, and that was at Jane and Hal's. It was a Christmas party. And Jane did leg of lamb, rack of lamb, whatever.
Like,
and I think it's the only time I've ever eaten lamb.
She hasn't eaten it since either.
You did a good job with it, too. And they were fun. Those parties were fun. As you remember, the hostess had the meat course. And then the rest of us would bring the vegetable or the dessert or salad, I think.
Each one was assigned something.
Mm-hmm. And we dressed hard when we could. We dressed for the Indian one. We gals wore saris. I can't remember what the men wore.
I don't remember.
Suits, I guess.
Time has gone so fast.
This will give you something to think about, and you can try to remember all these things that we've forgotten some of them.
Joe, I can remember one time that we found out how old we were getting. We always pitched horseshoes out at their parties, and one of them we decided to play basketball with Steve and the group. And I was racing around there pitching a ball and having a good time, and all of a sudden I couldn't breathe. My lungs were on fire, and it was then that I decided I was getting old.
That's probably one of the
So we sat down and talked about it. If you remember, we got all back to our horseshoes.
Joe, what were some of the ingredients that went in some of the burgoo? Didn't you bring some?
Everybody in the burgoos bought something that was unusual, and we had squirrel, rabbit, you name it,
chicken.
All kind of beef, chicken,
all kinds of vegetables,
anything you could think of, bones.
One time, June Frame, but she didn't put it in, brought a horned toad out in the desert and frozen the thing. So she brought that. Threatened to put it in, but she didn't.
But the burgoo was pretty good in general. Now, there were times when it had a little weird taste, and I guess what I'm trying to think of, what it tasted like, and it was smoke. where all the smoke, I remember making a lid for one of the pots we used.
You made a stir at one time.
Yes, and Shug Jones had to have the stir. I don't know whether you remember that or not.
Wooden paddle sort of thing. And Shug really coveted that. So we gave it to her. Or you did. I don't know who owned it at that point. I know Joe made it.
There one other thing that I had almost forgotten and should be mentioned. The dolls. The male and the female.
Those figurines.
And what we'd do, we'd have prizes at all our parties. And what happened, these two were awful looking. And what would happen, we'd pass them. You'd choose a box or something when, like, one person would have a party and they'd have a whole line of boxes. And they'd disguise these things. And these things went around for many years. I don't know how they ended or whether you remember what
They finally fell apart.
Was that it? What was it?
They were sort of like plaster Paris.
African gal or?
And a man. And they just looked so awful.
Yes. She was,
nothing you'd want to do on your
both of them were well endowed and they and shut off. But it was a lot of fun.
Joe, didn't you go shooting out at the farm a lot?
Not a whole lot, but we would get together and shoot. And I remember when your dad bought his, it was a 22, not a Ruger, but I can't think of a very popular gun, a Woodsman. And Coltwood.
Woodsman.
I think that was it. And then later on, I sold gotten a gun from a officer who was going overseas, and he traded me a brand new 44, and I sold you, if you remember, the 44 that I had, my Army 45. And if I recall, I paid about $14 for it. So you can let me know whether that's right or not. But I think I got it from National Rifle Association, and it cost $10 plus shipping.
Okay. We now we want to wish you a very, very happy birthday, and to Hal and Jane, a wonderful 63rd anniversary. And Joe and I have just had her 54th, so we're going to try to make the 63rd also. Happy anniversary.
I hope they're here that when this happens, and
Sure they will be.
it is an interesting fact that I have no difficulty remembering your birthday because you're 12 years older than I am. And that's one part we haven't got away from.
All right, Dad. What do we have next?
Okay, we've got Jenny Leever coming up here.
Okay.
And her husband, John Leever, passed away before this video was made. I can't remember how long a period it was, but I remember he got sick and passed away.
Yeah.
And Jenny and John, I think, were a few years older than Mom and Dad. Not by much, but a few years. Because I remember their children. I think they had 2 daughters, and they were older than Howard, than my brother.
Okay. And he is 8 years older than you.
Yeah.
So that they're quite a ways from you.
Or maybe they were about his age, but I remember John had passed away. I guess that's my main point. I don't remember the time period, and of course I never knew exactly how old any of them were. That's not something a child even asks about your mom and dad.
Exactly. Yeah. You don't really care.
But John and Jenny were the only other farm people in the group.
Okay.
They're the Cincinnati circle now.
Yep.
And they're the only other farm people. And they had a big farm. When I say a big farm, in those days, a big farm was 100 acres.
Yeah. Not thousands of acres.
No. So he probably had 100, 200 acres or so.
Yeah.
Up near Lebanon.
Yeah.
And they had and so Dad and John Leever had a lot in common because they both loved the farm and they loved the country.
Yeah.
And Lebanon and Bethel were both small town.
Yeah. Similar feel.
People. But John worked at a regular job. I can't remember where. It was one of the bigger companies in Cincinnati. I think he was an engineer, if I remember right. And he ended up selling a big part of his land to National Cash Register, NCR.
Okay.
NCR had just gotten into computers.
Gotcha.
And they started off as a cash register company in NCR, and then got into automated point of sale systems and stuff.
Yeah.
And he sold a big part of his acreage to them. I remember that.
Gotcha.
And that was a big deal. I have no idea what he got for it, but it was a good price.
Gotcha.
And then he kept the original.
Yeah. He still had had a little land.
And I was always impressed that a lot of his land was virgin land that had never been farmed.
Yeah.
And so he had some very old stands of trees.
Okay.
And the Department of Agriculture in Ohio keeps track of the oldest tree of a particular variety.
Okay.
And they know the oldest red maple and the oldest
that's so interesting.
Oak tree and the oldest this.
Yeah.
And John had 2 or 3 on that list.
Interesting.
And that was pretty cool that they would have a contest and they would come out and take pictures of it and verify
see if it's
it.
still healthy. And
I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, that is awesome.
So he would come out to the parties and
and
he and Dad would have a lot in common for the farming.
Yeah.
And they were the Leevers, which was part of the Glum.
Yeah, yeah.
They were one of the core people, and they took the trips together all the time. And, just really good people, and they always seemed to get along really, really well. And I liked them a lot.
Cool.
So let's hear it in Jenny's.
Exactly.
Too bad that John wasn't here.
No kidding.
Press that.
I wish we had some video of him, because I was just telling you, of all of their friends, I have the least memories of the Leevers.
Mm-hmm.
I may have met them once or twice. It's entirely possible. But I basically have zero memories of the two of them. So it would have been really cool to have a video.
He was quite, very, very quiet, very sincere kind of a person, very, very friendly.
Yeah, that's cool.
Of course, you could use that word friendly across the whole spectrum.
You're not being very
people in the whole group.
Exactly. You're not really eliminating anybody by qualifying with that.
But John was a very quiet, he's very easygoing.
Yeah. So let's get into this one.
Okay, let's hear it from him.
Happy birthday, Howard, and happy anniversary, Howard and Jane. Been a long time, but it's fun to watch everything go by. Years ago, Howard, you were sitting on the rooftop on a boat in Somerset Lake, and you saw Neil Armstrong go to the moon. And today they finished ballooning the world 86,000 miles. Quite a time has passed. We've had lots of fun together with our growing families, and our times together. And we were lucky, and we had lots of times together to enjoy things. Let's see, what else? Of course, you and John and Howard had lots of things about the farm to talk about. They're always busy on talking about soybeans and trees.
Did you have some prize-winning trees up at the farm that John and Hal used to talk about a lot?
Yeah. And then you, Howard, had your lake at the farm. You could swim, talk of it, and you could fish there. And you had all of your gumbo parties there. And our trips together in various places. It's memories that keep you together as you get older. And they mean a great deal. Like the time down in Texas, and you had just gotten a new car, and you decided we'd fly out to the new part in South Padre Island, and it was very sparse, not a bit telling. We went out in this park and went along the lake, and Don told him just how to turn and how it missed it. And we got stuck in the sand. And here we were worried to death because the tide was coming in.
Wow.
And so they had blankets in the car, and the men fixed the blankets. There was little cottages, nothing like that. And Jane had seen a tractor that had been out on the road. So she ran real fast up to this point, quite a distance, and finally found somebody after looking at a couple of places to see if anybody was home. And finally found somebody who could take the tractor and bring it down and get us in before the water got up to the hubcap. Gosh. Scared us out of death, but we made it.
That was on Padre Island.
And then, of course, we always had a good eating places in Texas. The Luby's eating place is just wonderful. We'd have meals together. The men would play golf. Jane and I would work around in the stores. There was one fine store there in McGowan where we stayed. And they had very fancy things. By fancy, I mean a glass-top table. Dining room table that cost $25,000. And the Mexican people would come right over and buy all of these things. And in some cases, they had their own planes to take back their luggage to the pickup over on this side. So it was fun to see the various mixtures of people. There's so many Northerners who come down there in the winter because it's a nice place. There are lots of things to do. And the little towns that are separated about 80 miles apart, but there's a nice expressway. And you could wander around at your own expense. Mm-hmm. The men would play golf. So we had good times together.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If you wondered how we got together, the girls had a club in which we sewed together. We were all thinking about getting married. And then John and I were the first to get married. So we were the chaperones on all the trips that we made. And of course, I used to tease John because he'd say, turn the radio down. But we,
But you met in the Alpha guys? Is that where you met?
The Morrisons and the Grubers and the Uibles and the
Leevers.
all the names pass forward.
Yeah, and Leevers.
Yeah. Now I remember a time when Jane and Howard were out in Washington at the time when the Mount Shasta blew up. And they were in town right afterward. I picked up the ashes. And then when they came home, they gave John some ashes, which he dearly loved because he was a geologist, was interested in all kinds of things like that. So we toured lots of places in the West. And one place I remember above all was the Grand Canyon. I've been there 4 times. The first time was in 1930 when I was a sophomore in college. Went out to the Alpha Chi Convention. There were 350 of us on the train from Chicago to Del Mar, California. And there were 7 of us, one girl in the group had her own golf clubs. That was Jenny Gunther. And she used the golf clubs on the course. And we all walked at it. So I walked there along with the other golfers, the name game golfers of today. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And afterwards, there were quite a few of us. At that time, Kay Whiting's mother was our chaperone. And we took this train trip from Del Mar down to southern part California and then back up to Seattle and then back to the various parks and so on and came back to Cincinnati. And in a wonderful time on one of the train trips, one of the porters saw us and remembered us from the train trip going out, 350. He said, oh, I hope it's not the same again. So, many things. Well, it's been a wonderful time this afternoon, seeing you and enjoying your presence. And Howard, have a wonderful happy birthday. I wonder what your class, high school class is going to do on your reunion this year. And Jane and Howard, I wish you the best on your anniversary. It's just wonderful to have friends like you. And Howard, you're a wonderful, loving friend. Thank you so much.
All right, Dad, who's next?
Okay, we've got Maxine Morrison coming up, and her husband, Bob Morrison, passed away before we did the taping. And they were part of the Glums again, the Cincinnati Circle.
Yeah.
And they, most of that whole Cincinnati Circle all stayed in the Cincinnati area their whole lives. Yeah. And Mom and Dad were the exception when they kind of took up roots and decided that Dad it was really important to Dad to raise a family on a farm in the country. That was important to him. And he had a book that he used to read back when they were living in an apartment down in College Hill.
Yeah.
And it was called the Have More Plan.
Yeah.
And it was how to live on a small piece of land and raise your own vegetables, your own trees, your own flower garden, how to raise your own fish, and how to use the land efficiently. And and he used to sit there and read that book over and over again. And I got a copy of it. Yeah. And I've read it myself a few times.
Yeah, that's cool.
But that was a way for him to dream of something that he wanted. It was important to him to raise his kids.
Yeah, that's his generation's equivalent of sitting around watching YouTube videos about living out in the country,
dreaming of what could be.
Yeah, of just sort of imagining yourself in the situation, and that for them, a good book about country living.
Yeah. And so perfect. It really is only the Leevers and Mom and Dad that moved away from Cincinnati.
Yeah. And you said they bought similarly, they bought a farm, but a much bigger one. Yeah.
But Morrisons were part of the Corps, and they all went through high school, went through college, got married, had children, all at the same time. So those friendships become really bonded when you go through every major cycle of a life, you know.
Yeah, you were all there for it.
And help each other, and times were tough back then.
Yeah.
You know, jobs were hard to get, and you took what you could get, and nobody had extra money, and and I made a comment to Mom one time. I'll never forget this. I said, you know, I've never seen you and Dad argue. I've never seen you have a fight.
Yeah.
And that's true. I never did.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, we had our fights, but we never did it in front of the kids.
Yeah.
And she said, you know, it was not easy growing up because money was tight, and we had 2 children, and you and your brother, and but we made it work. Yeah. And so this whole group of people who were born,
they'd also done the same thing at the same time
in the late teens. Were born in the 1915 to 1925 or so. I think all of them were born in that era. They all grew up in the same economy and stuff.
Yeah.
Bob graduated with in engineering, if I remember right, and worked for it was called Cincinnati Milling Machine back then.
Okay.
And they later changed it to Millicron. But they were a world leader of machinery and equipment, and you go, I see pictures all over the world of Cincinnati Millicron pictures from Australia and Asia and everywhere else.
They're a big deal.
And Bob had a key job over there in engineering, if I remember right. So
gotcha.
Good people, and they traveled together and did things together, and just good friends.
Yeah. Awesome.
So let's hear it from Maxine.
Yeah. Let's get into it.
They find out what it's like in College Hill now. I mean, College Hill has changed a lot, but across the street is still the little house where everything went on. But now the children, there's a baseball diamond over there, and children play. But it's the real old place. So I think you need to come over.
Now you remember lots. I mean, you and Mom
Sure.
go back a lot of years. What are some of the things that you remember?
I can remember studying for exams when we had to study for, when we had to go over to med school and take the exams over there. And because we had to take chemistry and zoology with med students. We weren't going to cut anybody out. We had to go to med school to take them. They couldn't teach us at UC. We had to go over there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was not any fun, but we did it anyway. But it was lots.
Didn't you take a streetcar over to school every day?
I did. I took the bus. And of course, when she came to Hyde Park, we had to change streetcars. And when we came up here at night, because we went back and forth, so standing on and waiting for the streetcar to come was half the fun. But I don't know. We didn't mind it at all in those days. That was part of it. And then going to the dances and everything. We had our clothes. I wish I could find our wedding pictures. And I looked for those today. But Jean thinks that she probably has them. She said, I think that you gave me that whole stack of pictures to put away for safekeeping.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so. The pictures of Jane's wedding and of Jane and Hal's wedding, and the picture of Bob and I.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we were in each other's weddings, and we were the only attendants. I mean, it wasn't a whole row. And Jean said, I'm sure that I have them someplace.
Sure.
But I thought I'm not going to ask her to get them out.
Yeah. Do you remember anything about the weddings on that day?
I don't really remember anything about mine. I remember Jane's, and I was scared to death because she was married first. And I was scared to death, that I wouldn't behave and everything like that. By the time Bob and mine came along, it was different. I mean, we were not married, of course, they were married. So it was fun, really fun. So now when I think about it, we could have done a lot of other things, which we didn't do.
But
Because the things I remember most were after you boys were born, and you came back and went to the farm, and we took the children up there, which was really fun.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to love going to the farm. So, and I don't know, you didn't have animals, did you?
We had a few.
Did you have a
Yeah,
few?
we had some cows and.
But you didn't have horses that they could ride or anything.
We had a horse for a while, but I think that was later on, though.
But I remember how much we loved the farm.
Probably went fishing out in the pond, probably.
And of course, Bob loved it because you always played horseshoes. And horseshoes that was the game. And that was the most fun, I think. Horseshoes, I never played, never held a horseshoe in my life, but we had the fun. Yeah, that was fun. So, of course, now when I think of how we're both settled, the retirement homes, I love that name, retirement. Did we deserve it or didn't we? Eventually we did.
What about some of the Glums stories? Didn't you take some trips, a lot of trips together?
We took a lot of local trips, picnic trips, but we didn't have a lot of lengthy trips. Frankly, we couldn't afford it. That was the trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, the Grubers were with us too part of the time, but not all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the Whitings were once in a while, but not all the time either.
Mm-hmm.
But mostly, and of course, the Leevers were all the time.
Were they?
Yeah. Have you been up to see Jimmy?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and of course, we loved going up there.
Sure.
To Jimmy's. But that was later. That was when we were all retired and the children were all grown. Because I just remember you two as the little kids playing around. Yeah, so it was really fun. I think this is neat that you're doing. Are they going to be? Awesome. Yeah, Thelma, she would have loved to hear Thelma. Because Thelma used to play. Well, Thelma, we sang in all kinds of musical things that were going on, and Thelma was always the leader. I mean, although she would come back and tell us, that's how I first saw her, Thelma, when she came back up in the north, because she had graduated a long time before us. She's much older than we are. And Thelma would always come back and train us for any kind of a singing contest that was going on campus. And there were a lot of things like that. And Thelma would always come back and give us the training. And she would teach us It's like school kids. It was real fun. Yeah. So
what's the Alpha Guy house look like now?
it's the same. Looks very much the same. Looks real nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Jane would love Thelma. So they wrote Thelma. Well, maybe there's someday I can get them over here. Is that a possibility?
We'll try. We'll
I
work.
can see you could bring them.
We'll work on it. Absolutely.
All right, because they'd love it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Howard would. And of course, he played golf, you see, with these guys that are down there now.
Uh-huh.
3 of them are left, I think. And I don't think he's playing golf anymore, but I think he played golf with them right after we all moved in here.
Uh-huh.
He was able to come. They called it the Hyde Park East or something like that, golfers, from this building to that building.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But she would like Thelma. She remembers Thelma as well as I do.
Uh-huh.
And of course, Thelma remembers her too. So that would be fun. Yeah, well, we'll have to work that out somehow, so they can come over. And of course, Howard's going to know some of the men here. I know he is.
Mm-hmm.
Because some of them were UC people. And a couple of them were profs. We have one who was a professor.
Uh-huh.
So he's still here. That says something, doesn't it? And you can go someplace and the professor will be there. What I really wish is that we could all get together again and remember some of the good times that we really had before, some before we had any kids, and then after the children were grown, like, like Steve. And we could all get together and remember all the things, because Jenny could. She could remember with her girls, because we did have some really good times together when they were all real young. And of course, I think there are some funny ones too. If we stop to think, we can find some really funny things that happen with all of us. But after all, this is a long time when we think about it. But that's the fun part.
So we're going to wish him happy birthday, happy anniversary. And
Happy anniversary, the whole thing.
Mhm.
Well,
Okay.
Birthdays are birthdays. They do come regardless. Can't do a thing about it, can we? Yeah. So I think it's really neat.
Good.
All right, then. Who's next?
Okay, next we've got my cousin David and his wife Cindy and their small child Emma. David is the son of my dad's brother.
Okay.
There was dad, who's Howard.
Yeah.
Had a brother, Dick. And Dick and his wife had 9 children. And David is the youngest of the 9.
Okay.
And they actually lived on a farm up near Mason at one point, and then eventually moved back to Cincinnati again. But David was by far the youngest of our siblings and cousins and stuff.
Yeah.
And so his relationship was a little bit different than the rest of them, because he was quite a bit younger than a lot of the other ones.
Yeah.
And the other ones, the older ones, the other 8, always used to come out to the farm for the summer parties and stuff, and spend time out there. And when David came along, he was kind of on his own, and when he came out by himself.
Yeah, like they had all moved on and they were doing other stuff.
And when the others came, it was a part of a group.
Yeah.
And so David had a different relationship with mom and dad.
Yeah.
And if you think about being one of 9, your relationship is not as tight as when you're an only child, like for example.
Yeah.
And so he would come out and he'd be something special. And living on the farm.
Yeah.
And at that time I was gone already.
Okay.
I'd gone on to school and college and moved on. And so David loved coming out there, and I think mom and dad enjoyed it as much as he did.
Well, of course they love having a young boy around the house again.
And so then David and Cindy got married. They were living in Hyde Park, and both had their careers and going.
Yeah.
And they decided they wanted to live in the country. And David I think he says it in this talk here.
Yeah.
Is that the only reason he wanted that, because his memories of living
from having that taste of it. Yeah.
Of being around the animals and the land around you and growing vegetables and that whole farm experience, and they did. They ended up buying the farm down in New Richmond, which they still have today. We're recording this in 2022.
Yeah. Still out there,
and they're still living there. So that was a real life-changing kind of a experience for them. And so David and I are friends, and so and we still see each other periodically. Emma has now grown, and
Emma's not so little anymore.
No, I mean, she's working at Children's Hospital, I think, and has several degrees, and been very successful in cancer research and stuff. And Cindy is a nutritionist. She has her PhD of working with people with the nutritionary stuff, and she has her own practice. So, David will tell you kind of a different perspective than the other people.
Interrupted. We'll pick up in a second. Hiya!
Who's that?
Me.
Hello, me.
How's it going?
How you doing?
Good.
We're doing some heavy duty recording today.
Oh my gosh! Bless your heart. I would not. I'm not good at that.
We're getting near the end of here, I think.
Yeah, I think we only got a couple people left. All right. Okay, just pick up that same train of thought.
Yeah. So Dave's perspective of that whole thing is a little bit different than the other people we've been seeing who are mom and dad's contemporaries, and this is a different generation. He's your generation.
Yeah. He's certainly closer to me. Than to you.
Yeah. Probably. He might be a little bit older than you, I think, isn't he?
Yeah. Oh, he is.
But not much.
Yeah.
Same.
Exactly.
Same era. Same generation.
Exactly.
So let's hear it from David.
Yeah. Let's get into it.
You'll be good at this.
Cool. Don't be bored.
Well, I wanted to wish Uncle Howard a happy 63rd birthday and
90.
I'm sorry, 90 and a 63rd anniversary for Jane and Howard, and talk a little bit about some of the great memories I have over the years. Even though I'm the youngest in the family, I feel like I've got a lot of the memories. Possibly, some of the best were the summer vacations I'd take out at the farm in Bethel. I can often recall my mother Verna taking me out to Lunken Airport where I'd meet Howard, and we'd drive out to Bethel. And on the way on State Route 125, which is Beachmont Avenue, we'd stop at United Dairy Farmers and get a milkshake. Of course, that was right before dinner, and we could never tell Jane we did that.
Okay, come here, Emma. Emma, come here. Can you sit over here, please? Okay.
So, anyhow, stopping for milkshakes was great at 5 o'clock, and we'd get to Bethel in time for dinner at 6, and we'd not tell Jane about that, and she'd always have a great dinner. And, I can always remember dessert was some kind of cherry pie or apple pie. And coming from a family with 9 kids, we always got these little slivers at home, but Jane would give me a quarter of a pie. That was quite a treat as well. But those weeks were always wonderful. I can remember I was an only child for a week that I was out there, but when I was back home, I was the youngest of 9. I can remember all the attention I got. And for one summer, building a tree house, and you'd call it a tree house, but I think it consisted of 2 boards up in one of the lowest limbs. And I could sit up there for half a day, and I had a little bucket with a string on it, and I'd lower it down, and Jane would fill it up with something, and pull it up and eat lunch up there. I don't know how old I was. I must have been 9 or 10, but it's funny how you remember things like that, but they were good. And then it seemed like the summer vacation always ended with a trip to the Claremont County Fair. And Howard would get up early and drive into Cincinnati for his work, but before he left, I'd still be asleep, and he'd always leave like $1.50 in quarters on my dresser, which at the time was an awful lot of money, I guess, because it would last the Claremont County Fair all day. And with the corn dogs and the games and the rides and everything else, it was a blast. But the other fond memories up there was the annual Uible picnic, I guess, which we always look forward to. And that was a great time with playing jarts and unlimited soft drinks. And I can remember one year where I was tied to a tree. I think that was photographed and hangs hangs up in the house somewhere at my parents' place. But my sister and brother still laugh about that one. But all in all, I guess my fondest memories was that we're up in Bethel, and I think that experience in Bethel and hearing about our family's farm up in Mason actually made me want to go out and have a farm of my own one day. That's how we ended up in New Richmond. And I guess I could say thank you, Howard and Jane, for those experiences which led to this today, which has been a great success for us. I could go on and on about little things about the house up there and the outhouse and the Camp David. I can remember Camp David was fixed up when Howard was retired. And we get out there on a cold day and get the little potbelly stove going and brew up some tea with a little black and white TV set and watch a football game on Sunday. And I'd say it was the best tasting tea I ever had. I don't know what it was, but sitting in that little one-room shack was pretty neat. And then the little hen house, I can remember climbing in and out of the doorway, a little hen house. I don't think I'd fit today. I also remember climbing in and out of the little doorway in the woodshed or the wood crib on the living room. You had the outside entrance, so you could push the wood up in there into the living room. I can remember Woody pushing me up through there one day. I got stuck in the last year. All in all, it was fun. The pea fights up in the pea shooter fights up in the hayloft, the barn, where we get on different sides of the loft and shoot peas back and forth. So that was back in the days when you had pea shooter guns and straws and things. But and ride the old farm-all tractor. All in all, I'd have to say that Howard and Jane probably gave me more attention than my own parents did. Quite often. I think I really appreciate all that attention that they've given me over the years. But maybe Cindy wants to talk about the most recent years when she got to know them after we got married.
Howard, I have memories of Howard and Jane when we lived on Madison. We lived on Madison. They lived on Edwards, and we lived on Michigan in the Pensacola, what was it? Priscilla apartment buildings. And I didn't know Howard and Jane, and I was new to the Uible, and I just thought Howard and Jane were just, I just thought they were just so fun to be around, and they always had all these adventures that they had been on. Yeah. And I just was really impressed by your ability to always have something new to talk about. We would go running a lot in Hyde Park, and we would always pass Howard either in the morning or in the afternoon, walking to and from buskins or graders or one of those lovely places that he went to get. And then we also remember Howard and Jane in Hyde Park because we used to go there to eat probably once every couple of months. And it was always fun to go in.
Well, they're great conversations. They always have something to talk about.
Howard is always interested in so many different things. And then we met Champ and Steve, and just to hear their relationships with the things in Tonga and all this, Peace Corps stuff was always interesting. And they always had all these interesting stories to tell about all their two sons and their two grandchildren, Cyrus and Darius. It was always, they always talked about them. And they're just really neat people, I think, to be around. We had things to talk about, and I was always wanting to go over there. I just wish that we could have gone over more often because Jane was always, when we lived across the street, Jane was always cooking all this food. We could go over there, and we had food that Jane liked. The days off, the pork chops and applesauce and the Jello, the green Jello molds with the pears in them or something.
That's when we were first married. We were living off of our waffle.
And Jane would always have all this food that was, normal for them. But I was like, wow, I haven't seen green Jello with pears in it for a pretty long time. And aspic, which is it's red Jello with tomatoes in it or something like that. But Jane would always make something like that with Jello mold. I thought that was interesting. What else? And then when they moved over to Madison Avenue over in, what was that place on Madison?
The Grandin House.
The Grandin House. when we lived in East Lawn Hills, I used to see them less then, but we would go there for dinner often to their other apartment. And every once in a while I would run past Howard when he would be on Madison, when he was walking in O'Brienville. And I would see him in the morning usually, not in the afternoon, but mostly in the morning when I would run to him early. He was always up there. He was always up there walking, and I would see him maybe once every other month running. Anyway, but I just really enjoy the company. I really enjoy Howard and Jane, and
wonderful people.
yeah, they're great people. When my only regret is that we wish we had seen them more often. Wish we had taken the time to see them more often.
But we live across the street.
We live across the street. And this is Emma. Emma, would you like to say something to Howard and Jane? Can you say hello, Howard and Jane? Hello. Can you say happy birthday, Uncle Howard? Happy birthday. Uncle Howard? To you.
Happy birthday
to you.
I'm sure they will.
Wait a minute, can you say happy anniversary, Aunt Jane and Uncle Howard, Emma? Okay.
Good.
Okay.
Retirement party for Howard from the library. And what sticks out in my mind about the retirement party is that all the gifts he received was fishing gear. And I think everyone thought that he was going to spend his retirement years fishing in that pond in Bethel, or else golfing, I think. And I think Howard did play golf once a week with a group of 3 other guys, but I'm not sure if he ever really enjoyed it except for the social aspects. But the fishing thing, I just used to fish often up there, and I'm not sure what we caught, but that was always a big deal. And they built a little dock up in that pond. You could stand on that dock and fish, but it was odd. But the attention I've received from Howard and Jane was incredible. You know, in the evenings or during the day, Jane would entertain me, and Howard would come home from work. I'm sure he was tired, and they'd have a big dinner, and we'd play all night. We'd get the golf balls out and putt in the living room and play games in the house. And you know, I guess Howard must have been in his mid-60s at that point.
Yeah.
And the fact that they entertained me as a 9-year-old or 8-year-old or whatever I was amazing.
You went out in the garden and stuff, strawberries?
Out in the garden, and it was always strawberry season at their house, and they had lots and lots of strawberries. I always remember putting the black plastic down and picking, and I think the strawberry pies fit into that too. Lots of strawberry pies. But all around was a great experience. Thank you.
Okay. Dad, who do we have next?
We've got Woody.
Okay.
Woody Uible.
Yep.
And Woody is David's older brother.
Yep.
And their father was Dick, who was my dad's brother. And Woody was probably 4, 5, 6 years older than David, I think. And so he and his brothers and sisters, there were of the 9 kids, there were 6 girls and 3 boys.
Yeah.
And they used to come out a lot, especially the ones in that middle age group.
Yeah.
Susan and Woody and Connie and Sally and Carol.
Yeah.
They were in that group very close to my age.
Yeah.
So they would come out quite often, spend a week in the summertime out at the farm.
Yeah.
And sometimes 2 or 3 at a time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I loved that because we're all the same age. We hung out and we went swimming, and it was a good summertime.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Woody was in that group. And so Woody's went into the financial world, and he's still working as a financial advisor, I believe. That may not be the proper term, but that's what he does. And great guy. And and so once again, he felt special when he came out to the farm, and Mom and Dad always had the kind of food that they liked, and we went and did the things that they didn't get to do at home.
Yeah.
And so he had a nice perspective, and it was a very positive experience of them coming up. So
Yeah.
I was glad that he was able to add.
Oh, heck yeah.
Add this to the celebration for Mom and Dad.
Yep, yep.
So let's Woody talk about it.
Awesome, awesome.
Uncle Howard, congratulations on your 90th birthday. Wow, that is a wonderful milestone. And I think it's a testimony to what a great life you and Aunt Jane have lived. And I know you have your 63rd wedding anniversary coming up in a couple months too, and that's such a great accomplishment. And again, I think that's just a wonderful testimony, as I said, to the great life you've lived. I think having the right balance in your life, doing all the right things contributes to a long lifespan. And I think you've certainly demonstrated that through all your work, all the kind of things that you've done in your work and the rest of your life and with your family. So my hat is off to you. It's great to have been a part of it for half of those years. That's interesting because I'm 45 and you're 90, so I'm half of where you are. And I hope the next half is as good as the second half that you've had. I think the other thing that I would like to emphasize in my remarks is what a wonderful experience I had in my life being part of yours. I have to say this, and I'm not doing this because I'm on tape or trying to be patronizing, but I think some of the fondest memories, the best memories I have as a child is being out at your farm. You and Aunt Jane made that such a wonderful time being out there for a couple weeks for a number of summers. And when I look back, I really don't even remember how many summers it actually was. It almost seems like every summer from when I was probably 5 to when I was 15, but it may have only been 4 or 5 summers, but I remember going out there for a couple weeks, and it is so vivid, the time being out in the barn and rooting around through a lot of your old stuff, or going over to the pond and fishing once a day and catching some bluegills or some, I guess they were bass, and keeping them in a bucket for a few days and then pitching them back, pumping the water out of the well, checking out the outhouse and the chicken coop. Those were really neat times. Going across the street and going down that lane, just walking around the property and checking different things out. I can still remember, thunderstorms that would come in across the fields, all those different things, going through the closet upstairs. I think a lot of times I think it was in Steve's old room, and going through that closet in the back, and there were lots of antiquities and old things that were great for a kid, just like the things out in the barn, maybe doing shooting. And then, of course, Aunt Jane made it particularly fun during the day. Of course, the highlight was going out to the Claremont County Fair one day during that stay, going on some of the rides and, eating all the junk, the candy, cotton candy and all the other stuff, having a hot dog, going on some rides. All of that was really neat. I'm just sort of rambling through all the memories because I remember you had that little party room, and that was kind of fun to go over there. But the whole thing was a wonderful package. It was very idyllic being out there for a week or two and having all those experiences. And I'll never forget those. And you and Aunt Jane made all that possible. I think something else I remember, I'm sort of placing these in order, was you would have the family out usually once every summer. We would have a big picnic out there. Of course, one of the highlights was you cooking your beans underground, and that was always so unusual, and it was such a kick for everybody that was certainly memorable to everybody. We'd also shoot from time to time, and that was fun. But there were all kinds of activities: volleyball, badminton, maybe some fishing, and all those things made it a wonderful event. Sometimes I think the highlight of the summer for some people, and everybody was always anxious to go out there. I remember once or twice going out there. I think the whole family was in our Volkswagen Bug, and we'd have 7 or 8 or 9 people, and in the Volkswagen Bug. The two smallest ones would go in the back seat, or in the storage area behind the back seat. There might be 3 or 4 in the back seat, and then Mom and Dad would be in the front seat, maybe with a baby on the lap. So I don't know how many we had in there, but it was we probably only did that once, but I certainly remember that. So again, that was another event that I remembered, and I just think that I admire you and Angelina so much for having such a well-balanced life. And there were so many interesting things that you all got involved in. I think how your 2 boys turned out is, again, a great legacy to all the kind of values and the experiences that you assembled in your life. And again, my hat is off to you. I hope you have a wonderful 90th birthday. And I think this tape sounds really... As Steve and I talked, there were a few other memories that were really noteworthy when I recall out at the farm. And that farm was such a an important event, and it was so complex, and there were so many dimensions to the lane across the street, because I remember living in the city where everything is somewhat confined. There's not a lot of open spaces, and I guess that's what was really incredible about the farm, was the open spaces. But being able to go across the road and walk down that lane, and being just so out in the open, and there's just nobody around, was a fun experience, because there were a lot of different things going down that lane, and it was just I don't know, it was like a path or something, and going down there, and there were some trees down at the end and fields on the side, and you just kind of got further and further away from everything, and that was just such a great escape. I remember that quite a bit. And a couple of times, I think, Uncle Howard, we walked down there, and you took your knife and you cut some things off of trees, or we'd look at different things, and I remember that too, and that was great being with you at this times. The other thing was, I remember your dog Tuffy, and having not had a pet, my parents, as you know, once they left the farm and before they got older, really, I guess, had their hands full with the kids and really didn't like pets around, dogs or cats. And so that was my real first experience with a dog. And Tuffy was always around as I made my way around the farm during the day or down the lane or wherever. And he was a good dog. And I also remember, speaking of animals, was the monkey. One time I went out there one summer, and I arrived to see a monkey in a cage back in that old, I guess, kind of the laundry room off the kitchen. And that was really amazing. I'm not sure you all were too excited about that, but you certainly put on a good face in terms of having that around, and that certainly provided some good entertainment. The other thing I remember was the croquet games out beyond the back there, back beyond where Mrs. Corkins' room was. That croquet game was always the height of the competition for the annual picnic. And that was such a great setting. That croquet court just really fit into that area so perfectly, with that tree and the shade and everything else. And it always got very competitive to see if we could get those balls sent into the nearby field there. And that was a lot of fun. I also, of course, remember the Carmen Gia that you had. And that was kind of an unusual, kind of my first experience with a sports car of any sort. And I remember one time, they had just tarred and chipped the road out there. And they had, the cars had collected a massive amount of that tar and chip in the wheel wells, and almost completely filled them. And it looked like it done some damage to the car, but that was kind of an eye-opening thing to see all that stuff. Again, because you hadn't seen that sort of thing in the city. So those were a few things that come to mind, and some other interesting kinds of experiences having been out there. And I know as I think about them, another thing about the farm I remember was a lot of always the fresh vegetables and fruit that was around. And again, this was just something that was a little bit different, because we just didn't have that kind of food around. It wasn't part of the normal food preparation routine of the Uible household in Pleasant Ridge. And so I remember there was always a lot of corn on the cob and tomatoes, and I remember shelling the lima beans. That was kind of a normal thing. Just fresh fruit, cantaloupe, particularly in the morning. And that always always made it kind of a real interesting mealtime, as well as at night. I do remember also, I guess, part of the experience growing up was knowing your two sons, Howard and Steve. I probably had somewhat limited contact with them, but they were always sort of my heroes as a kid. They led some pretty adventurous lives, full of a lot of different kinds of experiences, whether it was the Peace Corps or National Geographic or photography and all that kind of stuff. But that was always somewhat of a role model for me. Maybe that's too strong of a term, but it was certainly something that I greatly admired, just because of the kind of the risk-taking attitude that they took and being willing to be different and do different things. And that certainly was encouraged by you and Aunt Jane, and I think that's another great legacy that you have in terms of that ability to be different and take some risk. And I think that's really what life is a lot about. And you certainly get a lot more out of life by doing that sort of thing. And early on, that was my encouragement to be different came out of that experience that I had with your family, and that certainly originated with you and Aunt Jane. Another experience that I had, which was a little bit came later, was I think it was one night I came over to your apartment over on Observatory, and you showed me your knife collection, which I never realized that you were so much into that. And that was really something, all the variety of different knives and the history behind the different knives and how it all came together. I know someday some people are going to be really excited by being the recipient of that whole collection, because that's really some kind of collection. And I remember as part of that, when I took my trip over to Europe, which was a big event in my life as a 19-year-old, when I went backpacking in Europe for several months. Before the trip, you gave me a knife, and it was the knife that I really lived off of on that whole trip. It was like the equivalent of a Swiss Army knife, but it was from Mercedes-Benz, and it had the Mercedes emblem embedded, silver metal embedded into the black plastic. And that was a knife that I used to spread peanut butter and cut cheese and throughout my 4 months over there. And it really, I opened wine bottles. I did everything with that knife, and it was really a great knife. I still wish I had it today. Unfortunately, I kept it in my glove box in my car, and my car was broken into, probably a few years after I got back, and they took a lot of things, including that knife, and I really, really was upset. That was the only thing, and they took a lot of things out of the car, but that knife really upset me, losing that knife, because that was, having a Mercedes-Benz Swiss Army knife, that was a pretty rare item, and I really enjoyed that knife. So, that was just a lot of neat things. Having a farm is, I spent a lot of time when I was younger, and I still think about it today, having a farm. And as you know, David has a farm, and for a long time I thought about having a farm, and I still think about it, even if it was just maybe as something that you might have to go to occasionally on a weekend. But the reason for that is my experience out on your farm, and you can get into a lot of things that are so basic to life, and a lot of unique experiences. And I think there's the whole idea of sort of self-sufficiency, and that whole farm life is important. And I hope I might still have that ability to do something like that, because I think you certainly maximized what you could have derived from having had a farm. And I think you tried it all out there, and you did it. And again, I really admire that experience. So thanks again for all those memories, Howard and Aunt Jane.
Okay,
all right,
next week we've got Jim and Janet Corkins.
Okay.
And Jim's father was Bill Corkins.
Yep.
And that was my mom's only brother.
Mm-hmm.
Mom had one brother, Bill.
Okay.
Who was a couple of years younger than Mom.
Mm-hmm.
And he was killed in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
He was killed in Iwo Jima.
Mm-hmm.
And And so Jim, I don't think ever knew his dad. Or
Okay.
I think his mom was pregnant when Bill got killed, I think. I'm not sure exactly, but pretty close to that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I used to spend summers. They lived up in, Jim had an older brother, Bill.
Okay.
And they lived in a place up in Springfield, Ohio.
Okay.
And I remember spending summers up with them, with Bill and Jim.
Yeah.
And Jim was had a different relationship than the rest of them, obviously, because it's from mom's side and it's family.
Yeah.
But Jim would spend time coming down with us and Bill, and I'd spend time going up them.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Mom stayed in touch with Jim's mother, Dottie, who was married to Bill. When he was killed.
Yeah.
And Mom kept a good relationship with her.
Yeah.
For the whole life, really. And so Jim was a little bit older than me. Mm-hmm. He was in between Howard and me.
Okay.
And so I can remember great summers and him. He stayed. He used to come down and visit Mom and Dad a lot.
Okay.
After they moved around a couple of times, they were out in Colorado. I think they lived for a while, and they, Jim was a medical doctor at Williams College.
Okay.
In Massachusetts, I think.
Yeah.
Williams College.
Yeah.
And so he was a medical doctor for the Williams College, and Janet was the nurse at the college.
Gotcha. I didn't remember that part, that she was the nurse.
Yeah. And so then every time they came back home to Springfield, which is where Janet was from, they always came down to visit Mom and Dad.
Yeah.
So even after Mom and Dad left the farm and lived at the Seasons and Courtyard and places, they always came down for a visit.
Yeah, I remember them visiting an awful lot of times over the years.
So it was a great relationship. And, Jim has a little different perspective on that relationship with Mom and Dad. But you'll see a lot of common threads along with everybody else too.
Yeah.
So this one I did not record. I don't remember how we did. I asked him to record something and send it to me.
Yeah. This was one of the ones that I was surprised to see in the mix when you first gave me the tape. That I had just assumed it was going to be 100% local that you had done yourself, and then I was like, man, that's really cool. Like some of these people that they jumped through the hoops to have these made.
And then after them, we're going to see David.
Yeah.
Which is their second child.
Yeah.
From Jim and Janet. Mm-hmm. And David, I think, still lives out in Colorado.
Okay. That was the last I think I've heard anybody mention of him to me involved Colorado, but it's been a while.
We've kind of lost track in all the years.
Yeah.
But he's going to add a little bit, and his relationship was not as close to Mom and Dad as,
of course.
as the other ones, because he was never living in Cincinnati.
I was going to say they weren't local anymore when he was born.
We never was.
Yeah. So.
And so he's going to add some thought to it, but that's David. And this is his wife and their child. Who I don't know.
Yeah. We attended. This is Maura, and we attended that wedding.
That's right.
And that it was. I don't know if it was his wedding or Kathy's. Would have been basically my introduction to this whole side of the family. And I don't remember which one of them got married first, but they were relatively close together within a year or two.
Yep.
And those two trips out there were those were super cool for Cy and I to get to meet that whole side of the family.
And Jim and Janet are just super people.
Yeah.
And
I think I'm sure that I had met Jim and Janet before that on their various trips to Cincinnati, but it's I actually got to know them when we were out there for the wedding. I don't feel like I actually knew them at all.
Right.
Before the wedding trips.
But when you don't live in the same city and you've never been real close, and the kids are not real close,
exactly,
it just doesn't gel. But they're I know Jim and Jan always came to visit.
Yeah.
And I remember David coming to Cincinnati to visit his in-laws or his in-laws.
Okay.
And so they would come see Mom and Dad at the same time.
Yeah.
It was always part of the trip back to the Midwest.
Yeah.
So we'll hear it from Jim and Janet.
Great.
And then David too.
Yeah, great.
And his family.
Yep. Let's get into it.
On their parents'
It's recording right now because Sister Sage wanted it to go on.
Happy birthday or happy anniversary from Denver, Colorado. The thing that I remember most is that we never saw Aunt Jane and Uncle Howard enough. The things that I particularly remember about Aunt Jane are when she would cut the chickens' heads off on the farm. And I also remember making peanut butter sandwiches, but never getting the peanut butter spread all the way to the edges. And what I remember about Uncle Howard is that he was the most attentive and the best listener that I ever knew. It's kind of scary because you had to be careful what you said because you knew he was listening very carefully.
So my Karen, happy birthday, Uncle Howard, and happy anniversary, Aunt Jane and Uncle Howard. We're happy to share your day. I have lots of good memories too of traveling to the farm, and I remember David writing the chapter with Uncle Howard. We still have those pictures. I remember Kathy and David running around and Diane talking about what terrific grandparents you were going to be, and indeed, she was absolutely correct. And I still think that the two of you are the best role models we or anyone that ever had. Kathy and Warren and Jack and Sylvie are going to say hi, and David and William and more are going to say hi. Big smiles.
Hi, Aunt Jane and Uncle Howard. It's David. This is my wife Maura that you met before, and our son William. William is now, I think, 11 months old. 10 months old. And you can tell me who he looks like the most. But he's a pretty happy baby usually. But it's about his bedtime now, so he's getting tired. I think I remember, even though I was about William's age, but not much older, going to the farm and sitting on the tractor, and I think maybe fishing in the pond too with Uncle Howard, and that was pretty easy because I think there were a lot of fish in there. Either that or Uncle Howard was a very good fisherman, so I enjoyed that a lot. So as you can see, William's getting a little tired. More of this.
Hello, happy anniversary. Happy birthday. And happy birthday.
Okay, Dad.
Okay.
Who do we have next?
Next we've got Kathy Corkins.
Yep.
And Kathy is Jim and Janet's oldest child.
Mm-hmm.
And she grew up in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she's lived in the East Coast pretty much her whole life.
Mm-hmm.
But she and her mom, Janet, were always interested in the Corkins side of the family.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've done a lot of research and
cool.
History of from Germany coming over, and they were very close to my grandma, mom's mom, Selma Corkins.
Yeah,
they were very close, and remember her grandfather was the one that was killed in Iwo Jima, and so she kept ties with Mom and Dad through her mom.
Yeah,
and so that was she's a wonderful person, and has had a nice life.
Yeah,
and she's with her oldest son here in the interview here. So
yeah.
I was glad that they were able to do that video and send it to me, and we could put it in here together.
Yeah, exactly.
You've known Kathy through Facebook and through some emails, I think.
Yeah, exactly. We don't talk a lot, but I mean that goes for most of the family on here. You never talk as often as you wish that you did.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've known her for quite a while now, and like I said, with David's portion, I'm pretty sure she got married before David, and I think it was her wedding that we were out there for and meeting.
Okay.
Really getting to know all these folks for the first time. And I don't even remember what age I would have been. Probably young high school.
High school.
I would think maybe I was like a freshman or sophomore in high
because
school.
we made that a trip of the East Coast. In fact, I think we
Yeah,
made some college visits out of it.
I think we probably did. You're right. Went ahead and stopped in and visited a few while we were out there.
I remember we went to Columbia. I remember in
Yeah.
New York.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And then David got married out in that same area.
Yeah, and it was just a year or two later, and so then it was fun to go reconnect again.
Yeah.
In quick succession.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's get into Kathy's part.
Let's hear it from Kathy.
Happy anniversary. Happy birthday. It's Kathy from Denver. I have some very happy, more recent memories of spending time with Aunt Jane and Uncle Howard in Cincinnati on a couple of visits with Jack and also with Lauren. I remember a delicious luncheon that Aunt Jane prepared that I had to have a recipe for, ham and cheese bake, and it's one of our favorites. And we also had a nice meal with Joan and Steve and Jane Howard in Cincinnati. The last time we were there a couple years ago. This is Sylvie. She hasn't made it to Cincinnati yet, but hopefully she will soon. She's about to be 2. And ready for bed. One of my older memories of visiting Aunt Jane and Uncle Howard is looking in Grandma Corkins' cabinet with all the treasures that were housed there. And the last thing is how much I liked hearing about my grandmother from Aunt Jane. My grandmother. Have a great day. Happy celebrations, and we hope we get to see you this spring or summer. Good night, everybody.
All right, Dad, who do we have next?
We've got Bill Corkins, Bill and Diane.
Yep.
Bill is Jim's older brother.
Mm-hmm.
So his father was my Uncle Bill.
Yep, yep.
My brother, the one that was from World War II.
Yep, yep.
And they grew up in Springfield, as I mentioned, with Jim. And I remember some summers spending up with them. They lived on a beautiful log cabin house up in Springfield. Mm-hmm. They had a big front yard, I remember. Mm-hmm. And it was all exposed to logs and everything on the inside. Yeah. Beautiful place. And I remember one year when Jim and Bill were young, Mom gave them some birthday or some Christmas presents.
I remember this.
And the Christmas present was some pocket knives, because we grew up on a farm and every boy had a pocket knife.
Yeah, that's a rite of passage for a boy's first pocket knife.
Exactly. And so Mom had some pocket knives she gave to the boys.
Yeah.
And their mom went nuts.
Yeah.
So how in the world could you give boys that live in a log cabin who are prone to carving and stuff and cutting things a pocket knife? What are you thinking?
Yeah.
So I don't know how that ever got resolved, but I've heard the story many times.
Yeah. I said I remembered. Obviously I wasn't there. I just know I've witnessed retellings of that story. I don't know how many times over the years.
Yeah, that was funny though.
And it remains funny
and
to
of course,
this day.
Mom realized, she's, oh my God, what was I thinking?
Yeah. It's not obvious.
Bill worked for Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati.
Okay.
As an engineer. Mm-hmm. And that's where he met Diane.
Yep.
And Diane was also working at P&G.
Okay.
And they traveled together a couple of different places. I know they were on the East Coast for a while.
Okay.
And then they went out to California.
Okay.
And when Procter & Gamble opened up a new factory, Bill and Diane were involved in
they would be a part of that team.
Making it all happen and bringing it together. So they both had a very successful career at P&G.
Yeah.
And so they decided at one point that they wanted to join the Peace Corps. Mm-hmm. And if I remember right, that Procter & Gamble let them take a leave of absence.
Yeah, that's cool.
For 2 years or so.
Yeah.
To go do the Peace Corps.
Yeah.
And they went somewhere in Central America.
Okay.
If I remember right. And they went as business advisors to help local businesses set up and co-ops and stuff. And so I thought that was really cool. That was before I joined the Peace Corps.
I was going to say, I was going to ask if that was my next thing. Was that influential for you?
Yeah, I think
to
it
consider
was,
joining the Peace Corps.
Mm-hmm. wasn't the only reason, but it was
right.
somebody in the family who was doing something pretty cool.
Yeah. It's a point of contact, nice and close to you.
And so then they stayed in California then.
Okay.
And then in Ventura, if I remember right.
Okay.
And he had made some real estate purchases way back before all the inflation in California and there. So they owned some properties, some condos or something out there.
Yeah.
And Jim, his brother Jim, had a kidney failure.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill was an exact match.
Mm-hmm.
So he donated a kidney to Jim.
Yeah.
And that eventually, I think it failed. I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was a great gesture to your brother.
Well, of course.
To have a perfect match like that.
Yeah.
So and then they, after coming back from the Peace Corps, I think they decided to retire at that point.
Okay.
And they did tons of volunteer work.
Gotcha.
Out in California.
Mm-hmm.
They donated time. I remember they did tax preparation for the homeless people and so charities and churches and things.
Gotcha.
And got very involved in the local society, and they did that. Then, Bill then passed away, and then Diane is still living out there.
Gotcha.
But their relationship with mom and dad is going to be very similar to what we heard from Jim and Janet.
Yeah.
And Bill never missed an opportunity of coming back to visit his mom or his other family.
Yeah.
To come and see mom and dad.
Yeah.
That was a given.
You knew he was going to stop in.
Mm-hmm. And of course, mom and dad enjoyed it as much as they did.
Yeah.
So. Bill and Diane will tell the rest of the story.
Yeah, we'll let them tell it.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think that might be the last one. Then.
Yep. And we're so happy that Steve and Joan asked us to participate in this special occasion. And Steve asked us first if we could reminisce a little bit about things that we remember about. To me, it's Aunt Jane and Uncle Howard. And there are some memories I have. Most of them are from the farm, as you might imagine. Although I do remember visiting Uncle Howard in his office at the library. And I was really impressed. I thought, boy, he must really have an important job. And of course he did. Then it was such a difference spending time on the farm and seeing him in an entirely different environment. But we have many memories going back when my brother Jim and I would spend time on the farm. And I remember a lot of Sunday picnics when we would drive down in the days before the freeways. It took us quite a while to get there from Springfield, but we always look forward to it and having lunch out on the lawn, playing with the dogs. And it was always great fun. It always seemed like it was good weather. And I remember when we were real young, we used to go down and spend nights. I can't remember now whether we spent a week or 2 or 3 nights, but I remember spending the night. And I remember going to the barn a few times, and I think they had a cow there. And the first time I ever saw cow milk, and actually drinking milk hot and warm right from the cow. I'll never forget that experience. And then there were the times in the kitchen. Aunt Jane's kitchen always smelled wonderful. That was the best part of the house because she always had something in the stove, it seemed like. Probably apple pie or something like that, but it always smelled great. It made your mouth water. And Uncle Howard would take us back to the pond, look, see if we could see turtles or whatever might be back there. And listen to country music on the radio sometimes. And then I remember a couple times when we spent the night, and one year there was a real shortage of water. And Aunt Jane, I think about every 15 minutes, would remind us not to use the water. Don't use too much water. And whatever you do, don't use too much water. I think we took one shower the whole time we were there, my brother and I. And we knew the shower was right off the kitchen, and she was in the kitchen, and we knew she was listening. And she told us how to take a shower. Go in, just get enough water on your body to get it damp, soap all up, and then just use enough water to rinse it off. But we were petrified we were going to use too much water because, like I said, we knew she was listening. So we went in, did as she said, got pretty clean, I guess, for those days, and came out, and both of us took a shower, and in the whole time, the pump never came on once. And she couldn't believe it. And neither could we. I think we must have used like 2 quarts of water for the whole thing. But we saved the water like we were told. She had us real worried about that. Then the other time I remember overnight, and in those days, I don't know at the end if they had indoor laboratory or not, but in those days it was the outhouse. And one night I woke up in the middle of the night, or the boys were up there, we were supposed to be asleep, and I think we were talking, and I said, oh boy, I have to go to the bathroom. And I said, what? I have to get my clothes on, my slippers or shoes or whatever, and go downstairs and go outside. And Howard, Little Howard, or Champ as we nicknamed him, or he was nicknamed, probably nicknamed himself that, come to think of it. He told me, well, you could either do that, you could be downstairs, go outside, get a flashlight, do all that business, or you could do like we do and just hang it out the window and go from the second floor. Well, that sounded like a pretty good idea to me, so that was a lot easier. So that's what I did. And to this day, I don't know whether he was putting me on, if he and Steve ever did that, or they were just playing a joke on their city slicker cousins. But anyway, it worked. So that's a couple of memories that I have. There are many more, but we don't want to take up too much more time. The memories are all good, I know that. Diane, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, Aunt Jane and Uncle Howard, congratulations. We wish we could be there to celebrate with you, but hope you're having a wonderful time reliving all these memories with the family and friends that can be there with you. We won't be able to celebrate our 63rd together, but hopefully we'll get to 90. We wish you many, many more years of happy memories. And again, congratulations. Goodbye.
Goodbye, and good luck, and good health.
All right. Well, that was the last one. Dad, I want to thank you for, one, thinking to do this project all those years ago. Two, for setting aside the time today to help give me a little more insight into everybody, because I didn't. I feel like I can now watch it and get a lot more enjoyment out of it. Just having had you here to fill me in a little more on relationships and which circle of friends people came from, and that's that now makes it a lot more enjoyable for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I had fun. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed it immensely, mm-hmm. And I really want to thank you for putting it together, because mm-hmm. I don't have the technical ability mm-hmm. to mm-hmm. make it all happen. And for you to be able to put it into a digital form mm-hmm. that we can spread and hopefully passes on to some people who, the children and the grandchildren of the people that we just saw, for them to see it.
Yeah, and I think I told you, I've already sort of covertly shared a little of this with some people, and of course they were very appreciative, and they absolutely loved it. I'm sure there'll be more of that coming in the future. And so to everybody, you're welcome. We are very happy to share this footage, especially knowing, like we had said earlier, that there's quite possibly a few people in here for whom this might be the only video footage that exists of them. If that's the case, of course, it's going to be very valuable to your family to be able to see this. So hopefully you get as much enjoyment out of it as we have gotten working on this project. It's really fun to bring something like this back to life again when you've almost completely forgotten about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I, having done this today here, and this is December 2022 that we're recording this, and I really think it captured the essence of the topic.
Yeah, yeah.
And the topic was Howard and Jane's relationship.
Yeah,
with
to all these people,
with their people, and with their own children, and with the grandchildren.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it captured that essence.
Yeah. Oh,
very well.
Certainly, mission accomplished on that.
I wish we, looking back on it, hindsight's 2020. I wish I'd recorded their viewpoint on this.
Yeah, of course.
Or after they had seen it.
I agree. If we had even a little bit of video footage of them,
but I know
I would love to have it.
Yeah, when I gave it to them, it was 100% surprise to them.
Yeah.
I did not expect any of it because I didn't tell them what I was doing.
Yeah. So they didn't, and the friends all kept it quiet.
All the people we interviewed, I said, "Now don't tell mom and dad about this."
Yeah. I want it to be a surprise.
And, it just blew them away.
Yeah.
And mom was crying like a baby.
Yeah.
So I think it's cool, and I thank you for putting it together.
Oh, you're welcome.
And you can make it digital, so it's we don't have to worry about getting lost in somebody's closet.
Yeah, but by the time you all see this, you are more than likely watching this on YouTube, or maybe we've also spread it to other social media platforms. But yeah, we'll try to make it easy to find, and then also we will, through all the connections we have, we will try our best to get a hold of all these families and get links into the right hands or onto the right phones.